is important. And I want to acknowledge and thank you for being here. I'd also like to thank my board for being here. So thank you for that. Very much appreciate that. I want you to know this is the chief's presentation of the budget. This is not the board's budget. This is me asking for your feedback so that I can present to the board what the community tells me they would like to see in terms of public safety. So this is very important, and I'm glad that you're here. And we'll have an interactive component to things when we get started. But to start with, I am going to quickly just do a land acknowledgement. This was presented to me from an inspector I know with the Treaty 3 Police Service. When she and I had an opportunity to sit down, we had a discussion one day about some policing matters. So I'll start with this. We acknowledge that we live and work on the ancestral and traditional territories of many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations. We're grateful for the traditional knowledge keepers and elders who are still with us today, and those who have gone before us. We recognize the land as an act of reconciliation and gratitude to those whose territory we reside on or are visiting. So I think that was important to say. So just some housekeeping issues. If anybody needs to use the facilities here, they're just out the doors here to the left, at the center doors. This is going to be interactive, as I said, but the first period of the presentation is me talking. And I hope that what you'll find I say is riveting, because we're going to turn down the lights in order to, and I hope not to put you to sleep. So, perfect. Thank you very much. Well, that makes it considerably harder to read my notes. All right. So we have a variety of people here, as I said, in the audience. This is important to me that you all have an opportunity to hear what your police are doing. I'm not good at standing behind a microphone. You all get an opportunity to hear what your police are doing, where your money is going, how we approach public safety. Where do we sit in the world of our comparators in policing? That's important, because outside of Peterborough, we benchmark against our other police agencies. What are they doing? How are they doing? What are they doing well? What are we doing well? What can we learn? And what should we not be doing? Or what are we going to have to stop doing? And I think that's important as well. You're going to hear some hard truths tonight. I'll tell some anecdotes, hopefully some fun stories, some different things that might be enlightening, things you may not have heard before. And I'm going to start with a question first. And I'm going to ask, just for those who don't know the answer to this, to be the ones who respond. For those who do know the answer, I will ask you not to say anything. But can anybody tell me tonight how many marked uniformed police cars go on the road every day for a day shift? Does anybody have an idea how many cars we put on the road in a day shift? Just yell it out if you have an idea. 10, 12, 6, 10. Any other numbers? 5. Good grief. Not 5, but we could get there if we have to, I suppose. Depends on how you vote. So, no, I'm kidding. Let's put a pin in that. So we've heard these numbers thrown about, and I want to get back to that when we talk about where our people are and what they're doing, because I think that's important. Quite often when I ask that question out in the community, people will tell me, oh, there has to be 30 officers out there at any given time in a uniform answering calls for service. So put that in your mind there and just have a thought on that. All right, Sandra, I hope that I can advance this properly. So we're going to look at this budget, and we're going to look at the past, how it's impacted the present, and where it's going to go in the future. And I'll read some of these because I recognize for those who are at the back, maybe you're not going to be able to see that very well. But 4% increase in 2023 over our budget this year. However, it's worth noting that between 2015 and 2021, our budget increases were less than 3%. And that's important to know. Because ask yourself when you get to this point and when I do the presentation, but was the cost of policing restricted to 3%, and did we get the results we wanted to get? Okay. So, because I believe it's having an impact and it's limited the service's ability to grow with the community. Our community continues to grow, and you're going to see some slides later on that look at staffing. And you're going to see where we are compared to where we were. How many officers are available to respond to those calls for service? You're going to see that we have some fixed costs. For those who are from council, I know I watched the commissioners all present. I saw that, and it was very, very interesting for me to watch that take place. I understand that was a first, much as this town hall is a first. But there are fixed costs we cannot control, and you're going to get a look at those as well. And then this one here, this is what I would call a known unknown. So this last bullet point, for those who can't read it, are going to be the legislative requirements associated to the new Police Services Act. That will be, it has been proclaimed, and it takes effect April 1st, 2024. I know there was some question about whether this legislation had passed. It has passed. It received royal assent last year. It will be proclaimed into force on April 1st, 2024. That will be the new law of the land. And as you know, there are things within the current Police Services Act that tell us what the police shall and shall not do. It tells us what equipment we have to have in our cars, what equipment we have to have on our person. It tells us what services we shall provide. It also tells us what services don't count as adequate and effective policing. Having looked at some of the regulations associated to this new legislation, I can tell you they are expensive. I've lodged my concerns with the ministry on why I think some of these things are almost going to be unattainable, and they're going to be a burden. We're talking big changes to some of the equipment and some of the staffing requirements. Let me give you an example. This is where I sort of go off topic. The tactical units that we have right now, the way the current Police Service Act is written in the regulation says you have to have 12 officers for a tactical team. Okay? That is about to go up to 18 officers. That's 18 people who aren't going to be at work when they're training. That's an additional 6 people that need all that expensive equipment to do the job. 12 works. I know. I've worked in a big service. Many of you will know I came from York Regional Police before I went to London, before I came here. I am a critical incident commander. I have used the resources of our TAC teams, of our hostage rescue teams. 18 is a great number for hostage rescue. We don't have a hostage rescue team here. We have a tactical team. Currently as just designated as a containment team, but used as a tactical team. 12 works. The regulation has been changed to say 18. I've lodged my concerns for that. It's very GTA-centric, because that's what the big services can have. Right? I've worked in the big services. There are 12 Big 12 police services. That's what they call them, the Big 12. There's 43 municipal police services in this province. 12 of them are big. That leaves another 32 that are mids and smalls. We are actually considered a mid-sized police service. We are number 20 out of those 43. We're almost smack dab in the middle. 18 is going to be probably prohibitively expensive. Can we rely on the OPP or Durham Police to come to our rescue in the city of Peterborough when we need them? I can tell you we can't. They do a great job for us when they're available. But just 2 weeks ago, we were in Durham Region helping execute a search warrant because their team was already busy. We did it with our 12 people. So those are the sorts of things I think that are going to be important for us to consider and look at. So there's 2 budgets, capital budget, provincial budget. I guess it's all the same money, and I won't get into the nuances of that, but really the one that hits us most, hits us hardest, is going to be the operating budget. Right? That operating is your day-to-day costs. The capital is paying for things like buildings, cars, those things that have a longer lifespan over many years. So these are the types of things that fall within that capital budget. Fleet. So we'll be looking for 3 vehicles this year. We're trying to electrify, trying to go hybrid vehicles where we can. Access to those vehicles, and I know some people who've recently made the switch to hybrid. It's months and months and months if you can get one, because every other police service is doing the same thing. But we're trying. We need a new facility, and we have some things in the works on that, and I'm pretty excited about that. So I'll say stay tuned. I can't spill the beans on that, but do stay tuned. Information technology. This one here, for the council members, for anybody who may have watched council in January of this year and asked me about information technology. I'm a bit of a data guy. I know enough about technology to be dangerous, just not good at it, but I know the right questions to ask. I had a business analytics unit that reported to me in 2 different police organizations. This is a big one for me. This is a concern for me. This should be a concern for you. Anybody remember May 31st of this year? Put out a big media release saying, hey, we had our 911 system failed. That was devastating for me because I bear all the accountability, but none of the responsibility for making sure our 911 system works. Because I am the chief of police, people expect that the chief of police will ensure there is 911 service available in this community. I expect it. But here's a little secret, and this is part of what I'm going to tell you. These are the dirty little secrets that you don't get to hear. We have a 911 server, CAD server, everything flows through. When you call 911 and we answer police, fire, ambulance, it goes to a CAD server in our building on Water Street. And you're probably thinking, okay, well, how did it fail? You have a backup, surely. You're right, we do. It sits right beside the main server in the same room. For years and years and years, it's sat there. Years, and it hasn't been moved. That's where it sits. And did I tell you, by the way, and I would ask that, please don't report this out, we have no fire suppression in our building. Your 911 call center is in that building. That's critical infrastructure for your safety, for the community safety, my accountability. No fire suppression in that building. That's where your 911 is. That's where your backup 911 is. That's a concern for me. I hope it's a concern for you. This is a big reason why we're making some of these pushes. You'll see here CEWs, different server equipment. These are things that we're looking to attain. Equipment such as roadside screening devices. I can't avoid buying roadside screening devices. The legislation and the case law has come out saying, do not give a breath test to somebody on the side of the road unless you have a roadside screening device in which to give to them right at the time. We've got case law now that says it will be tossed out. I have to have enough to put in every car, or I can't do that on the side of the road when I think I've pulled over a drunk driver. That's important. I would say that's non-negotiable from a road safety perspective for our community. In-car cameras, as you know, of course, we put in-car cameras, paid for by a grant, because we couldn't afford it, but we got a grant, thanks to the provincial government, to put in-car cameras in every one of our marked cars, well, 25 of our marked cars. But we need to fill the rest of that. Because you know as well as I do, just the way Murphy's Law works, if one of those cars without a camera shows up at a call and something terrible happens, it's just going to be the one that doesn't have the camera. And then people are going to say, Chief, how did you let that happen? Crowd management. Well, August 2022, August 13, in fact, we know that we had a little situation here at our police station where members of the community tried to arrest our police officers. We found some old equipment. We were able to get some people trained up in crowd management. And those folks will be properly trained, properly outfitted, and they will be part of our entire response plan to head of the Trent, because that's what the community would expect, it's what I would expect, and that's what we're going to have. So that's incredibly important. So what are we dealing with here? So this is where we police, the center being our map of the city proper. Within the heart of the map, I suppose, I don't know if that's just artistic, but within the heart of the map is red, and that is the downtown. Make of that what you will. In the south here, in the purple, of course, is going to be Cavan Monaghan, and in the north, Lakefield. So that's where we police. That's approximately 98,000 people, all told, between, and that comes from StatCan. And so as I asked you, how many officers are on the road for that? Well, I can tell you in the day shift, we put 11 officers in a marked car out there. So how do they deploy? One goes to Lakefield, one goes to Cavan, one sits on the front desk, because somebody's got to be there when somebody walks in through the front door. That leaves 8 officers for approximately 86,000 people in the city of Peterborough itself. 8 officers. Are you happy with that? Maybe you are. We're going to talk about that, because that's how many you've got right now. Now, what's our policing complement look like? We have 154 sworn officers right now, so we're authorized for 148, but our board, you know, in their wisdom, said, hey, listen, we recognize there are people who aren't at work for some various reasons, often related to injuries sustained during the course of their duties, policing and keeping the community safe, said, we will authorize you to go over complement because we believe that is what we need to do to make this community safe. Thankfully, they do that. Because out of those 154, 123 are fully deployable. And by fully deployable, I mean they are kitted out just like I am, and they can run out to help somebody out of that 154. That's not a lot. We're going to show you an organizational chart later, and I'll break down where those officers are, because I think it's important when you talk about community safety, where are they? And then, of course, and this is the part people often forget, what's our civilian staff look like? We're expensive. Police officers are expensive. I don't doubt that. But who better to do the work than somebody who's a trained professional? You don't need a police officer with a gun on their hip dispatching. It sounds ludicrous. You wouldn't have a police officer with a gun on their hip doing your finance, doing your HR, purchasing your clothing, looking after your vehicles. That's important stuff. Who's dealing with your policies and procedures? Who's grabbing all the video evidence and disclosing it for court? Because unlike every other emergency service provider, the police have to prepare for court. And what you see us do on the road is probably 1/3 of what we do in total, maybe even less than 1/3. But the rest takes place behind the scenes to get something before the court. And I know we have our crown here, and he can tell you what's coming through the court is probably burying his crowns to be able to even keep up, and the courts to keep up. But that's our job. And although people want to see more guns on the street, they want to see more red stripes on the pants, walking the street, walking the beat, we can't do it unless we have the supports behind the scene. And that's really important because people don't think about that. So I want to make sure that we cover that off here. So what are our core responsibilities? Because I think this is important for you to know. Crime prevention, law enforcement, maintaining the public peace. That's your public order type of events. We now have crowd management training. We did not have that, by the way, for that maintaining the public peace. Emergency response, you've heard me talk about that. 12, soon to be 18. Not sure how we're going to get that. But if we can't provide it, we're going to have to write an MOU with another police service and maybe wait for them to show up, unless that changes in the regulations. And I know we have an MPP here who's probably taken notes on some of these things. And assistance to victims of crime. We have far too many victims of crime. And that's a core responsibility for us to be able to provide that. And I know we have some of our victim services folks here today too. And then this is a new one for the new Police Services Act come April 1st. Any other prescribed policing functions that may be, and there's no definition of what that is. So to be continued, I suppose, on that one. This, like I said, there are some unknowns here. But equally as important, and you will have heard me say this on January 23rd earlier this year, what's not adequate and effective policing? So up until this point, when the board presents their budget and when the chief gives the board, here's what I need to provide public safety in this city. It typically includes all types of enforcement, whether that be bylaw, but most importantly and most expensively, prisoner transportation and court security. That's no longer considered adequate and effective policing when it comes to budgeting. The board has to provide a budget that provides adequate and effective policing. But it doesn't include prisoner transportation and court security. That isn't cheap, and we can't control it. The courts are about to open up a new courtroom. They need 3 more people to provide security for that. We have no choice. The Police Services Act says you shall provide it. You are the police of jurisdiction. I can't just materialize 3 people, but that's what it's going to take. Who's going to pay for that? It's been downloaded to us in the Police Services Act. I have to pay for that. It's non-negotiable. So what am I going to stop doing to get that? So then we look at some of these benchmarks when I'm preparing the budget and when our team is preparing the budget, and I say, well, what has the community said up until now? And we know that the community has participated in a community safety and well-being plan. We know that's recently been adopted. Here's another weird one. That's in the Police Services Act, but as the chief, I'm just a voice at the table. The Community Safety and Well-Being Plan is the city's plan, contained in the Police Services Act, and the chief is just a voice at the table. So I don't get to really say a whole lot. You get to offer. So how does the community feel? What does the Community Safety and Well-Being Plan currently reveal about policing? Well, it reveals 67% of survey respondents believe that crime's increased in their community. It has. They're not wrong. 50% say that, only 50% say that they would recommend this city to their friends. That one's sad. And I say to people, how do we sell this city? You could be a cop anywhere. When we're recruiting people, I say, why would I come to Peterborough? I could be a cop anywhere. Our salaries, they're basically the same across the entire province. Doesn't matter where you are. Whether you're in Windsor, you're in Peterborough, you're in Ottawa, you're in North Bay, the salaries are the same. So why come to Peterborough? I know why I'm here, and I think it's beautiful here. How do we sell the city? Because only 50% of the people that responded to the city's survey said they would recommend it. Only 48% of the people said that they feel very safe or safe in their community. That means more than half the people here in this community don't feel safe. That ain't good. And I'm just going to say it out, like, that is not good. That bothers me as a police chief, and I know in talking to my counselors, I know in talking to my board, that is not where we want to be. We need to move the needle on that. So what else are they saying? Well, we know that, oh, sorry, skipped over that one. That one says Peterborough Police is understaffed and under-resourced, making it difficult to take a proactive approach to policing in the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. It's true. It is difficult. Crime prevention is one of our main roles of proactive policing. So, 86% said that policing is very important. That's why I have you here, because 86% of the community says policing is important. It's up to me to present to you why we say we need what we need, and up to you to help us to get to that. 71% note that feelings about safety influences what they do or where they go. And I know when I talk to the folks in the DBIA and they talk about downtown, and you've probably heard a lot about that, right? When they worry about people not coming downtown, 71% says that will influence where they go and what they do. And 50% of the respondents, well, they say that more police would make them feel safer. I didn't make this up. This is in the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. And I think that's important because half the people say that would make them feel safer, and more than half say they don't currently feel safe. So how do we get there? Oh, and that's that bottom one again. So we're answering the call, and I'm going to show you some stats now. I'm a bit of a stats guy. Just so you know, I lead the Police Information and Statistics Committee with the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police. I like stats. I like data. Data tells the truth. But where I feel it is when I see the 52% don't feel safe. So we know 911. So I've told you, Peterborough Police is the primary public service answering point in this city. When you call 911, it's not, nobody else is answering that phone but the dispatchers on Water Street. That's who's answering the phone first. And they ask you, police, fire, ambulance, what do you need? And then they transfer it. And where do they transfer it? Well, 3% gets transferred to fire from the Peterborough City here, and 42 goes to EMS. And pretty much anything that goes to EMS, they want the police there too, because our EMS folks are finding that they are also becoming the victims of violence. So we're going to those calls too. But we're the ones taking the calls. 165,000 of them, to be exact. And when are those calls coming in? Well, that's the workload distribution curve across a 24-hour period. And as no surprise, as people start to wake, it ramps up and it gets busy throughout the day. And then as you can see, just after midnight, it starts to die down, but it doesn't disappear. We still have to have police officers out there 24 hours a day. And as any of the officers in this room could tell you, they'll all remember that's when the big call came in. That's when I needed the resources. I can tell you, sadly, we've had 3 homicides in this city so far this year. They all happened after dark, and they all happened late in the day, in the early morning hours. That's big. We need those resources. Unlike most other city agencies, we are the 24/7 agency. We are the ones that are responding to those calls. I had our dispatchers send me some calls, some funny calls, some weird calls, the types of calls that you'd think, why is this even going to the police? I listened to one. Somebody called because there was a skunk acting oddly at the end of their driveway. And they called because nobody was answering the call. They said, we've been trying for an hour. Nobody will pick up the phone. You got to send a cop out here now, because if you don't, I'm afraid some kid's going to get bitten on their way to school. It's first day of school. I'm afraid somebody's going to get bitten. Send the police. This is a 911 call. And in case you think that's an anomaly, I just got one sent to me on the weekend for a person screaming at a dispatcher because CAA wasn't showing up. And they're calling 911 because CAA had not shown up for them yet in the middle of the night. And I've heard worse. I've heard butterflies keeping somebody trapped in their house for 8 hours because the person had a violent phobia towards butterflies, and there was a butterfly on their screen door for 8 hours and they couldn't get out of the house. And that's where they called the police. We get called for everything. And I don't think people appreciate just what that means. And that's what makes up part of that 165,000 calls for service. I logged in today while you were all sort of taking your seats just to see what were the calls that are sitting there right now waiting for an officer to respond. I'll share some of those with you here. This one comes up a lot, as you're going to see. Suspicious person. I wonder where that might be. Oh, it's downtown, right? Somebody doesn't like the look of somebody who is wearing a hospital gown. That's a police call. Right? That's one that comes to us. Oh, there was one here where they want the police to facilitate the exchange for child custody. Please send the police. And sometimes, and I know the Crown will know, sometimes the judges write that right into the orders. And suddenly the police are now doing that. By the way, who do you think, when a prisoner or somebody's put to court, they're an accused, and they've been released, they get an ankle bracelet on them so we can track where they go. They got to stay within a certain boundaries. It's battery powered. Who do you think checks the batteries to make sure that they're charged? The battery police do. That's us. We get the phone calls from the ministry saying, hey, can you go check Stu's ankle bracelet? We're getting a low battery signal coming from there. Or, hey, the bracelet has stopped functioning. Can you please go check that? We've become the battery police. When I say that we're literally called for everything, we are called for everything. And I'm not sure everybody realizes that. And that's when it's happening. Now, here's one I like to ask. Some parts of this are interactive. As you saw from our map, right, you saw on the map that we have the 4 core areas in the city. And I'm going to leave Lakefield and Cavan out because they're a smaller population and they have smaller demands on our service. But out of the city center, what's the busiest area of our city? North, east, south, central? Anybody know? Sorry, downtown? Anybody else? North? Yeah. Whoever said north, you're right. But when you hear it, you would think it's what we call Area 1, that's that red, the heart of the city, right? You would think that's the busiest area. Now, they're all pretty equal. But quite right, the north end, the yellow, they're gold at the top end there, actually generates the most volume of calls for us. They're a different kind of a call, but that's what's generating the most work for us is up in that end. As you can see here, Area 3, so that's going to be in your west, southwest. Area 4, of course, in your east. The distribution's fairly equal, but we can use data like this, we can use the calls for service that you saw, and we can start being able to put our people in the right place at the right time to do the right thing, if you have the right number of people. These are some of the questions and some of the debates I've been having. And I asked, and we're going to get to a slide, I said, how long does it take us to get to a 911 call? A priority 1 call, help, somebody's beating me up, right? Or there's a weapon, help, I see somebody just robbed me with a gun. How long does it take us to get to that call on average? Any guesses? No, that's 4.5. Wow, that's ambitious. We'd be breaking some speed laws to get there, I can promise you that. Yeah. Well, with certain circumstances. But you know what? We're also bound by all the same traffic restrictions that you've got. Construction, congestion, everything else is impacting our ability to get around as well, as is the number of officers. Because if we're at one side of the city and we got to get somewhere else because we're getting pulled in all those directions, and I'm going to show you a slide in that in a bit to show you where we're at. Because I can tell you it's not going in the right direction. And you'll remember, and there's going to be a slide coming up that'll point that out too. Some of this information was foreshadowed January 23rd, 2023, when I appeared before council and you asked me to talk about the budget. You'll see about that. So this is, and I don't expect you to be able to read this. I can't read this without my glasses. This is the distribution of work across this city in 2022. At the top, I know, the most calls we get. Is this a police call? Suspicious person. That is the most calls we get. Now, for the councillors in here, and I think the mayor will be joining us shortly, if he's not already here. I also know you get a lot of, oh, there he is. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know you get a lot of complaints about traffic I know you get a lot of complaints about speeding, about stop signs. I get it, because you pass them on to me, so literally, I get it. I know what that's like. I can tell you, that's our third busiest one. And number 6, traffic complaints, responding to traffic complaints. That's what's keeping us busy. That's the distribution of work. Now at the bottom, this little one down here, 194, that's sudden deaths. Pretty grisly, pretty gruesome, 194 sudden deaths that the police have been dispatched to. And when we go to that, we have to go to make sure there's nothing that is suspicious about that. That's not a quick call. That's 2 officers and a supervisor. By the way, there is a regulation within the Police Services Act that tells us when supervisors have to be notified and when supervisors have to attend a call. So out of those people that are on the road, 2 of them are going to that call and a supervisor is going as well. Because they have to do that. And then they have to wait till a coroner comes. And the coroner will determine whether or not there's anything and what they're doing with it, if we need to hold the scene. If we hold the scene, then what? You've now got people permanently off the road while they're holding that scene because the coroner wants us to until they've done their postmortem. Right? 194 of those sudden deaths. That's not overdoses, although some maybe fall into that. But that's sudden deaths. That's the stuff for officers when they go to over and over and over again. That's this cumulative sort of trauma that leads to some of this occupational stress injury. And you hear about the presumptive legislation around PTSD. It's real. So that's workload for us. We have all kinds of things on here that I would hazard a guess are not police matters, but it's what the community expects. Because who do they call when there's a skunk at the end of their driveway? They call the police. Who do they call when there's noise? They call the police because there's nobody else to call. I've come into work some days, and I know because I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but our comm center is right on the path to my office. So usually I stop in there and say hi every morning, and I stop in and say goodbye every night, most nights. And I often look, and whether it's good or bad, we put some technology on the phones, and I can see what's going out on the road, and sometimes they'll say, why is that call there? Why are we waiting on this call? What's going on with that? Because some of those calls, they shouldn't be in there. But the people expect that we're going to do that because there's nobody else. We aren't like everybody else. And that's a piece I think that's critically important. When it comes time to budgeting, we are 24/7, 365 days. When people are having the worst day of their life, the police are the ones that are there. We are there. Nobody else. Sometimes EMS, sometimes fire. 3% of the time, fire. 44% of the time, EMS. But the police are always there. And I know I've gotten some letters that say the police never show up to the call. We got over 33,000 calls, as you'll see. So when I asked you how fast are we getting? So this is part of the challenge. And I'm going to take you back. So you're going to see how this all layers together now, right? So we talked about information technology. This type of data that we're pulling, I don't have anybody to do that. I'm actually using a crime analyst who should be analyzing crime patterns, crime trends, who's creating the greatest harm in our community. I'm having to pay her on weekends and overtime at the night, and having to use another person who's dedicated to human trafficking crime analysis to build these types of tools for me, because I don't have anybody to pull this. But you deserve it, you expect it, and so you should have it. Because when you're making a decision about our budget, you should have data like this to make an informed decision. And one of the questions I had for this organization was, how long does it take us to get to a 911 priority 1 emergency call? And the answer is, I don't know, because we've never measured that before. And that's okay. We've never had the technology to measure that before, but we do now. So I paid this person. I had to pay her overtime. Thankfully, she was good with that. Because I can tell you, it gets a little old, gets a little tiring. It sounds great at first, but when you're working your 40 hours a week and then you're doing another 20 on top of that, it gets old fast. She built me these dashboards. And we know it takes us, here's the reveal. So this is a cumulative time, but I'm going to break it down for you, as I don't expect that you're going to be able to read this. It says 12.6 minutes. So from the time the dispatchers receive the call to the time it's put in to be dispatched is 2.6 minutes. That has gotten better over the last 3 years. It's gotten faster. Kudos to them. But as you can see, from the time the officer is dispatched to the time they're first on scene, this one down here, so the time the call was time the call was added, minus that 2.6, so we're actually down to 7.4 minutes. When you call help, help, somebody's attacking me, somebody's holding me up with a gun, somebody's holding me up with a knife, I think there's somebody in that store robbing it, it's going to take us 7.4 minutes. The previous 2 years, it was 6 minutes. And as you're going to see, and as I've already said in the media, our crime trend is going in the wrong direction. And as it goes up, clearance rates go down, and it takes us longer to get there, I'd say that there's some sort of a correlation happening. And I think it's important, because we need to understand where are we. So next we're going to come into how we measure crime. I think this is important as well. So this is the Violent Crime Severity Index. So what does that mean? As I told you, I'm a bit of a stats guy. And then what is the colors? What are the colors? So I'll first break down the colors. So the colors are our comparators, single-tier municipalities like us, one level of government, who have a police service of similar size. So this is who we compare ourselves to. This is our benchmark. So in the orange, we have Thunder Bay. In the blue is Brantford. In the gray is Kingston. Yellow is Barrie. Peterborough is green. We're always going to be green in the following graphs. The colors will not change. Guelph is that fuchsia color. And then the two lines across, well, the white is always going to be the Ontario average, and the red is always the Canadian average. So this is where it's telling us. So what is the crime severity index? Right? So these are your people crimes. Right? These are the crimes that, not property, somebody broke into my car. This is somebody punched me, somebody robbed me, somebody did worse. This is the violent crime. And crime severity index is essentially, in the most basic of ways for me to be able to sort of distill it down, is it takes sort of the average incarceration rate, the time, the number of incarceration rate, and the time people get in jail or custody in the local jurisdiction based on the number of crimes. And they divide that, and they do the math, and they come up with this. And as you can see, in the green, we are always above the provincial average, except for back in 2018. That's important. Put a pin in that. 2018, we were below it. But then we started to creep up. We got really high in 2020. There's some anomalies happening in Peterborough, I can tell you, in 2020 and 2021 that didn't happen elsewhere. For some reason, we saw an increase in this city, whereas other cities actually saw a crime trend go down during those COVID years of lockdown. But this city, it went the opposite direction. A little bizarre. And then, of course, 2021 and 2022, I can tell you that we're just nudged over the Canadian average, but we're certainly well over the Ontario average for violent crime and the violent crime severity. So you're probably thinking, well, what about property crime? What about it? That's it. Again, same colors, right? So we have the same colors, and we can look back to see who's got low violent. So if you're looking at the far right, the 2022, you can see where your Barrie, your Kingston, Barrie being right beside us in the green, Guelph in the fuchsia, Brantford in the blue. This is violent crime. And this is property crime. These are somebody broke into my car, somebody broke into my house, somebody broke a window, somebody damaged something, spray paint, whatever the case might be. This is where we are here. This isn't great. This is going in the wrong direction. This is what I'd like to do something about. And I'm hoping to get your support with that. I'm hoping that you will provide some feedback, that you tell me how you want us to get there. And I can push that back to my board and say, this is what the community wants. Quite frankly, I think it's what the community deserves. What are you doing there? I think this is the intermission? Holy cow. Sorry, a little comic relief. Thanks, Angela. You can't see it, but I know she's just blushing deep red right now, feeling terrible about that. That's okay. I appreciate that. So I promised not to put you to sleep. Hopefully this isn't doing that. As you see here, so you're going to see a big gap on this graph. That's 2020. The reason that gap is there is because in 2020, Statistics Canada did not track the police administration survey because of COVID. Everybody was out of the office. and nobody was pulling that data forward for StatCan, so that's why we have a gap in the 2020 year, because we couldn't get the comparators, so it wouldn't be fair. But this is criminal cases per officer. This one's important, right? This is criminal cases per officer. And again, the colors haven't changed. Peterborough is still in the green. And as you can see, all of our comparators very much the same, but we're quite a ways a bit in 2022. That's important. Now here's a real interesting little fact. In 2021, WSIB, they made an award and a ruling for an officer who's working in a police service, not ours, who put forward a successful case that says, I am overworked, I am dealing with high demands, people are pushing for this, the community expects certain things, the workload hasn't decreased, the workload keeps increasing, the pace of my work is getting faster, the demands are higher, the victims are feeling more vulnerable. And he went off on occupational stress, PTSD, and they upheld that. That's presumptive legislation. That officer's out because of increased workload. That's very real. Cases per officer. And if they're not on the road, we're not backfilling their spots because we don't have the money to do that. Right? We are paying, we're a Schedule II employer. So we are paying 100% of the salary and the administrative fee to WSIB. So that's about 128%. Tia, just nod if that's correct. Yes, perfect. Tia's our finance person. Listen, if you think that we're making anything funny on the numbers, I can tell you, Tia, I tell you everybody this, Tia used to work for the Canada Revenue Agency, and if there's anybody who's going to keep the police on track, it's going to be the CRA, and she does a fantastic job. You can rest assured you're in good hands. So, that's important. And why is that important? Well, because our clearance rate's going down. Workload's going up, clearance rate's going down. You expect us to solve crimes. We expect to solve crimes. That's what we did. That's what we do. And yet, you can only do as much as you've got the time. And you've heard me say this in many cases now. If we have more, we can do more. We want to solve more crimes. We expect, and I would suspect that you would expect, we are solving more crimes. Now, I will also throw a little shout out to our investigative services folks, and in fact, our entire team has brought us some tremendous success in this city. Tremendous success. We have solved homicides in 6 days. We've solved 2 homicides from last year, this year. That's phenomenal, but it came at a cost. And that's important. Because to solve a homicide is no inexpensive deal. And I suspect, if I were to look around this room, you would expect us to solve homicides. But when we run out of all other investigative avenues, all other options, quite often what we'll go to is the wiretap. Now that's pretty sexy on TV. It looks really kind of cool. Oh, gosh, they're up on wires. Paul will know here from our Crown's office that is no easy thing to get, and it's not cheap. We're roughly running about $180,000 to $250,000 for 60 days to do a wiretap. $250,000. But is that too high a price to pay to bring somebody to justice who's committed a homicide? Probably not, if you're the loved ones of that person. But we've done 2 this year. Where's that money coming from? We can't plan for that. And you know how we had to do the budget last year. We spent $830,000 out of the reserve. That is our rainy day fund. That's our stuff that we can go into when we have unexpected expenses, when we're trying to solve crimes. That's close to $500,000. And I can tell you, for many of the things we do, we need the support of other police agencies. We've already sent 11 requests to the OPP to assist with things this year. All of last year we had 11, and the year before 10. We will exceed that by far. Fortunately, the OPP is not charging us for that, but they could. And in fact, in the new Police Services Act, we're going to have memorandums of understanding for this type of service. They could. Now, we all remember there was a very sad incident earlier this year. Traffic collision took the life of a young girl. It took too long to solve that occurrence. Right? That happened in the spring. We've only just laid charges because we didn't have the tools to do that job. We had to send the little black box, if you will. It's not quite that. It's technical piece that even goes over my head, but we had to send that piece to Durham Regional Police and say, hey, listen, In your own workload, will you please do an analysis of this to tell us the behavior of the driver when they were operating that vehicle? Because we don't have the tools to do that job. We don't have the people to do that job. We had to wait nearly 6 months to get an answer for the family, for the community, to say what was happening at the time of that collision. Because everybody had their speculation as to what was happening. But the only thing that could tell us for sure is what was going on in that vehicle at that time. What did the computer say was happening with the gas, with the brakes? What was the operator's behavior? And we don't have that tool to do that job. We have the same issues with cell phones. Every one of us, I'm sure in this room, has at least one of these. Every one of us. You can bet every time we do an investigation, there is a component of that investigation that involves digital evidence. Well, who's doing the analysis of that? Who's writing the warrants for that? Who's downloading the information off of that, sifting through all of that information to put forward enough information, maybe to get a warrant, maybe to get more information, to get it in front of the court to have a successful prosecution or a guilty plea? We are. Nobody else is doing that for us. That's the stuff you don't get to see behind the scenes that we have to do. And we don't have an option. But there's digital evidence in absolutely everything we do. We put CCTV cameras in the downtown core, thankfully. They helped us solve 2 homicides. There's no doubt that they were integral to helping us solve those homicides and doing that within 6 days each, nearly unheard of. I know that seems ridiculously quick. It is. But that's because the CCTV cameras helped us. But guess what? That's just the tip of the iceberg, because somebody has to go through and catalog all that information, make sure that we have that properly saved, uploaded, put to the Crown's office. Who's redacting the information that we may need to pull out of there? And we have the in-car cameras in every cruiser. Same thing, digital evidence. Who's managing that? Every time there's a call into 911 and we have to take that information because those phone lines are recorded, somebody has to handle that. It's not a cop with a gun on their hip, it's a civilian. The very civilians that many people say, you don't need more civilians, we want more cops on the street. Well, if I'm pulling in all kinds of digital evidence and I don't have somebody behind the scenes who's going through that and making sure I've got an airtight case, I got nothing. It costs money to police successfully in our community. We are not overly expensive, and we're going to get to the money things here shortly, but I need to set some context. So this is our weighted clearance rate going in the wrong direction. I'll remind you, this is going up, this is going down. Can we afford to continue in that trend? I would say not. What does workload look like? Well, we'll get to some of that. Now, this is a way that we can offset some of our work. And we heard this very loud, very clear, probably most prominently early and shortly after the murder of George Floyd. Every time we've had an issue with somebody who's in mental health, we hear these types of things. The police aren't the best ones to do. Now, George Floyd was a different situation. That was just bad behavior. And I think everybody in this room would condemn that behavior, myself included. But then we have other people who are in acute mental distress, or people who are suffering something, and it might be an addiction. Is the cop on the street with a gun on their hip, as well-intentioned, as well-trained as they can be, the right response? I would argue not. The best person to respond to that is a mental health professional. Everybody agrees. And there's different versions. Ours is MCIT, there's COAST and other locations, there's HEAT teams in different locations. They're called various things, but they always pair a mental health professional with a police officer, because some of these situations are unpredictable, they can be violent, and somebody has to be there to manage that aspect, while the properly trained person can deal with that acute issue and situation and try and de-escalate things safely. We've heard some challenges around funding this. People are going to say, hey, it's the police. Listen, we fund it. We provide the cars, we provide the officers, we provide the space, we provide the bulletproof vests for the members who are participating in that. But we aren't in the business of mental health. We're good at this. This is where we go. This is what we do. We rely on the mental health people. We need to have better partnerships in the community. This is a great partnership. There have been studies on this and this type of response model. This is what people are wanting. Now, there's an up to this. It's an upsell, and I'm not pushing you on that in case you think this is like a commercial, like, wait, there's more. I'm not pushing on that. But some of the more successful communities are putting a mental health professional right in the 911 dispatch. and they're diverting at least 17% of the calls off the street altogether, so that somebody doesn't even have to go to that call because they get put in touch with the right resource at the right time by a mental health professional when they are in distress. That's not cheap. And tell you, Waterloo got a grant for that, I think $12 or $13 million to get that up and running. You know, because you were here, my last net budget was about just slightly more than double that for the entire police service. They got that just to set that up in their comm center. But I know it works. This is the next best thing for us on the street, MCIT. Mental health professionals, and in this case, we had 3 teams briefly. We're at 2 now. 1's at risk. But if you're somebody who's in acute mental stress and distress, you want one of these people responding. You want Andrew here, Michelle there. You want them responding. You want them de-escalating. They want the police officer beside them just in case. This is important. There's been 668 mental health calls for service directly connected to MCIT. This is important. Out of those, only 62 went to hospital as a mental health apprehension. There's a difference, right? They're not criminals. They're suffering. They don't need to be arrested. They are apprehended. It's a distinction. They're not under arrest. They are apprehended for their safety, for ours, for everybody else's. That number would be much higher if it was just police making the judgment. Not because we are bad, not because we don't know how to do our job, but because that's not our job. We aren't the trained mental health professionals. We're the people there to make sure people are safe. We need somebody to de-escalate. And as good as our training is, it's not what we went to school for. That's who goes to school for it. They do a great job. People call in all day long wanting to talk to these folks. There's follow-up that happens. It does not stop at the street because there is follow-up that happens. When an officer deals with somebody, they say, hey, listen, I went to this assault call, but this person seemed to be really suffering and they were in stress. Can you reach out to them? Mom says that her son needs somebody to talk to. Can you touch base and give them some resources? That happens too. That's not the stuff that you see in stats. It's not the stuff people see on the road. It's not the sexy sort of interaction with the police that people are seeing, but it's important. And it's a resource that if it wasn't here, wouldn't exist. And it's every single police chief has said, we don't believe we are the right response for people who are in mental distress. If they are in that condition, they don't need to see me. I could be triggering just by showing up in a uniform or showing up with a gun on my hip. I need somebody who's properly trained. I can't say enough good things about not just these 2 individuals in particular, but about the program. And every single police service is saying the same thing. Where I left before I came here, they had 4. We did a full-blown evaluation and study with a university on the success of that. And they're saying, yeah, as good as that was, you could use more. So, it's not all doom and gloom, but some of it is. And here's some of the things we've done so far. We made arrest, shooting death of Peterborough mother. We have a Peterborough man facing 12 charges for theft, robberies at 2 different businesses. By the way, I hear, oh, the cops never solve the theft. The cops never do this. I've got some in here from just last night where we arrested a couple people, one going through vehicles, one going through stores at the mall. We don't get them all, but we're working at it. Well, that's the flooding. You saw the picture of me with my pant legs rolled up to my knees. Murder suspect arrested in the Sioux. That 3rd person was outstanding. Multiple charges, multiple previous offenses. We had to go to the Sault Ste. Marie. That isn't cheap. Right? They don't just happen here. The last person we arrested was from Milton, but he came here to commit his offenses. Well, this one here, great initiative, but can you imagine the type of protests that we get there? And we're there to keep the peace. So we're tracking the cost of that, because I promised my board I would track. How much time are we spending doing things that don't necessarily fill the police role? So we go to things like this, the drag queen story time. It doesn't matter what side of that fence you might be on. The fact of the matter is we're in the middle. And we're there to keep the peace. And so far, I've spent more than $50,000 just keeping people separated at these types of offenses. It cost me more for one. The most volatile one of these was over $8,000 in salaries for police officers to keep people separated. It costs less than the St. Paddy's Day deployment. Or it costs more, rather, than the St. Paddy's Day deployment. The Rehill lot, when we go there and we were helping to tidy and keep the peace for that, we're constantly tracking those as well. So, different things here. First-degree murder, downtown stabbing, we charged. So we're busy. The reason I pulled these ones up, most of these are violent types of crimes. These are the types of crimes and the type of people we want off our streets. And you'll hear us talk about things, and you hear bail reform, and you hear people say, hey, and I'm one of them, put people in jail, keep the ones we're afraid of in jail, keep the ones we're mad at, well, we can divert them to something else. Every single premier has signed off on a request for bail reform, and every chief of police is behind that. It's important. So, as I say, it's not all doom and gloom, because we do a lot of community events as well. These are the types of things that our officers love to do. We just don't get enough time to do it. This was at our open house. They said to me, you know, we've never done one. And I'm like, how could we not? This is the type of thing that you as the community, I should think, would expect to see. You want to engage, you want to interact, you want to see what's the other side of policing. Because typically people only think of us when we're coming in on your worst day of your life. And of course, as I said to somebody here earlier today, the only thing people like more than a firefighter is a police dog. And if I had been thinking, I would have brought one here tonight. But, and that's just a bit of a joke with police and fire. But this is where we would like to be. This is where we need to be. This is the type of community interaction I think is important. It builds relationships with people when they're young so that they turn out well. So where are the people? Now, I don't expect you to read all this. This is our organizational chart. You can look at this chart. We're going to come back to this chart a little later on. But the reason I have this up here right now is to give you what our structure looks like. The yellow boxes, those are units that are part-time. So it sees in here, you know, ERT. So our tactical team members, they're on the streets, patrolling the streets, answering calls just like everybody else. Our K9 members are doing the same thing, right? The bottom one, so it's the RPAS, it's the remotely piloted aircraft system. I hate the term I'm about to use, but you might know that one better, but please don't repeat it. It's drone. Drone is military. This isn't a remotely piloted aircraft system. It's more about surveillance in terms of safety, right? So that's important. Peer support in our volunteers. Peer support, that's a volunteer unit to help members helping members. But this is important because when I asked you how many people were on the road, those people, and I hope I get the laser pointer right on this. Let's see. Sandra, oh yeah, okay. Those people fall in this column here. There's 81 of them spread across 4 platoons. They've got to have their mandated training, and you're going to see where that goes. We don't make that training up. That's mandated by the province. We are doing just what's required. I would expect you'd probably want us to do more than the bare minimum, unless good is good enough. For me, it's not. But maybe for everybody else, it is. But that's what we're doing right now. Now, we're going to talk about some of these other units. Traffic is here. Training is here. We have 1 sworn member, 1 civilian member doing the training for the entire police service. That's pretty hard. So what he does is he pulls on other officers, takes them away from what they're doing so they can provide training to the rest of the organization. We're going to take from this group to do that. And as long as we're doing that, that means these officers aren't doing what they should be doing because there's nobody else to do that training. Now, you probably know, right? The police, we have to be proficient with the use of our firearms. We have to. It's non-negotiable. Every year, every police officer has to requalify on their pistol and on the rifle. The ministry says this, you shall do this. It's a safety thing. Non-negotiable. We do ours in a gravel pit because we don't have a place to do that. We're shooting in a gravel pit. Is that the best thing for your police service to be doing? We're literally 1 hour away from the Toronto, and we're firing our firearms in a gravel pit because we have no other place to do that. That's not ideal. But we're making do, and I haven't heard a whole lot of people complaining. We could do better. But it's a gravel pit. So these are important. Now this investigative services column here, The ones who I've said have been knocking it out of the park, there's only 35 people in that entire area. Right? And that's who's doing it. So you'll hear me sometimes say, when we go all hands on deck to investigate a homicide, we have to pull people off of other things. Because we've only got 35 people in there. So somebody might have to drop a sexual assault investigation or a human trafficking investigation because they have a homicide that they need to help solve. Because we just don't have the extra people to do that. So how are we looking in terms of numbers? Well, remember when I said put a pin in 2018? So there's 2018 here, and we had 140 authorized people in that date. We're up to now, in 2023, we have 148 authorized. Remember, the board has let us go over by 6, so that's great. But the deployable, the officers who can go out on the street today, keep in mind, presumptive PTSD legislation, other injuries, mat leave, pat leave, all the other entitlements that employees are entitled to, we actually have fewer officers that are deployable now than we did in 2018. We had 130 that could go out on the road then. We have 124 now. And if you recall, cases per officer is going up, clearance is going down, officers not keeping pace. We don't have the same volume. Is that a trend we can afford? Maybe. So how long does it take to get an officer? Well, this one's important because people are, why don't you just go hire somebody? It takes 13 to 16 months to replace an officer, and I'm looking at maybe up to 8 who are looking to go to another police service. Remember when I said, why would you work in Peterborough? Well, I've got 8 people who are looking to go to other police services for different reasons. Some want to go north because that's the type of idyllic country that they want to live in. Some found love and they want to move far away. We can't control for that. But it takes 13 to 16 months just to get an officer through their training so they can deploy in a police car by themselves. Because we know, based on the requirements to get hired these days and the provincial mandated standards, by the time they start to look to apply, it's usually taking the average recruit 3 months. Then they're going to be trying to go through all the interviews, the tests, the psychological test. You want us to hire people, the right people. It's going to take, in the background investigations, 3 to 4 months. Once they get through that, they're going to spend a couple of weeks with us before they go to the police college. They go to the police college for 3 months. They come back for another couple of weeks. And then they spend 3 months with a coach officer who shows them how to do the job. Take your books learning at the Ontario Police College, let's put it into practice. At that particular point, all they know is theory, they don't know practical application. And they're being trained to do that in those 3 months. Now, you might say, okay, great, there's 3 months. But remember, they've had 3 months of practical application. And that just gets them to this line here. They got another 3 years or 36 months before they become what's considered first class. We start at 4th, we go to 3rd, 2nd, 1st. So hierarchy in terms of what your skill set is. And no matter how good you are, and I'm sure each of you can attest to that in your own areas, you only know so much when you come out of school. And it's that experience that builds your competence. And it's no different for police. It's almost like an apprenticeship. If you're a mechanic, do you want the guy or the woman who's just finished their apprenticeship wiring up your house? Or do you want the full, this is the person who's been doing it for years. This is the one I want fixing the brakes on my car. That's okay, they can learn. But this is who I'm trusting my life to. And we got some great officers who sit between 4th class and 1st class. But they're still learning too. And we owe it to them to support them in their development because that's a 30-year plus journey for them. And as a community, you deserve the best trained officers you can get. And we do our absolute best. And we have some great officers. We really do. Because they're solving homicides, some of them in 6 days. But it's not a quick. So when an officer is laid off, if somebody says, well, just hire more cops, it's like if you hired them here in 2023 of January, they're not even hitting the road by themselves. If they start applying in January, they're not hitting the road till May of 2024. An investment today is going to pay off tomorrow. It's not an immediate investment. And that's something that's difficult for people to understand. I can hire a professional who's a civilian member, who's a finance person, who's a HR person. We can do that in the city. We can do that in every other area, fire and EMS accepted. But for police, that's how long it takes. And rightfully so. We have probably the greatest responsibility. We can literally take away your rights. We can literally suspend them as we arrest you and take you into custody. You want to make sure we're doing it right. We carry deadly force on our hip. You want to make sure we're doing it right. We can't afford to scrimp here. So, we're going to drive into the budget, because this is a part we all want to see, but we needed to see some context. And we're going to talk about the good, we're going to talk about the bad, we're going to talk about the ugly, and not in the way you think. For us, the good is the best case scenario. The bad, well, that's middle of the road. The ugly, well, the ugly gets ugly, and you're going to see where that fits. And we're going to look at the pie. Where does our money go? Well, 90% goes to personnel. Now you're going to say, wow, that's a lot. Maybe you got too many people. Well, I just showed you how many we got. We got less now than we did in 2018. 90% of our budget goes to people. Now that training that I just talked about being so critically important is less than 1%. And that includes travel time, because that's all we have the opportunity to do. We don't have the luxury of time. We are a lean organization. That's our pie. That's what it looks like. And you're going to see, where do we fit in that pie in terms of the city's budget? I'm going to come to that in 3 slides. It's a bit of a revelation. So we're going to give you 3 scenarios. Often they're referred to as when the police are looking for more people. Sometimes it's referred to as, the policing enhancements. The policing are looking to enhance. That has a connotation like it's something nice, right? A nice to have. What I'm going to tell you is, you need to have this. You deserve to have this. You expect to have this. So we have the good. This is our theme here. Improves our service delivery. The bad just meets our legislative requirements. And the ugly, well, that's zero growth despite a growing community. Now, keep in mind, I just talked about 13 to 16 months. We know now that we've committed to doing 4,700 new homes by the time 2031 rolls around. 2.5 people per home. I think it's just over 12,000 new people. It's going to take us 13 to 16 months to get an officer trained. When do we want to start hiring to get those extra 12,000 people? Because we already saw we're below. When do we start investing for tomorrow to make sure we have the police there to provide us a safe environment, when it's going to take 13 to 16 months? Because you aren't going to hire them on a dime. It's going to take that long. So these are the things I said I foreshadowed, and I went through my tape in January of 2023 when I had the opportunity to speak in front of the Finance Committee and in front of Council. This was me, brand spanking new, and I made a commitment. And the commitment was, when I appear before you, you will get the straight goods, whether it's good or bad. You will have my commitment to nothing but the truth. And that was at 13:30 in the video, just so you know. I said the community expectations are not increasing, or not decreasing, they are increasing. And we've seen that. Remember the skunk? CAA? Those are just 2. I need to ensure we can put people in the right place at the right time with the right tools so they can do the right thing. Now we've seen the ability to do some of that. Some of you will heard or have seen we talk about the device called the armadillo, right? That allows us to monitor and track what's the actual driving behavior look like. I know we just had this conversation in our last board meeting. We were able to present some of that to Lakefield as far as, hey, this is where we're seeing a lot of speeding. Is it real or isn't it? Right? So we can monitor that and make sure that we're putting our expensive resources in the right place to curb certain behaviors. And then, in order for me to stand up here next year to support what I'm asking for, I have to bring you hard data. And that's what I'm bringing you. As best as I've got. And I'd love to have more. But this is as best as I've got with the resources I've got. And then this one. And this one comes from one of our Finance Committee members, Bob Hall. This budget, 2023, is delaying an impact to next year's budget. A very significant impact. Heads up, no one's going to be pulling anything over on you. We said that. This shouldn't be a surprise when we come to you with this expectation or this request. We told you this is what was going to happen. We went into this. So where do we sit? Well, interestingly enough, we have a certain pie. And I heard and I watched all the commissioners present to council, and they all talked about this is the slice of our pie of the city's total budget. That's important. I also heard them use the words chronically underfunded. Every single commissioner said chronically underfunded. That's important. So what's our slice of the pie? Is it getting bigger? Because everybody says, oh God, the police, they're a black hole. We just keep throwing more money and nothing ever comes of it. Well, guess what? The slice of our pie has actually gotten smaller. Since 2015, we're now a smaller slice of the pie. Now the pie is bigger, dollars are bigger, but in terms of percent of the city's overall budget, we're actually a smaller slice of that pie. And yet people will tell you, oh, the cops, they're just a black hole. They just want more money all the time. We're spending more on the cops. Well, we're spending more on everything, but the cops' portion of what we're spending is getting smaller. Now, you've seen what the consequences of that are. Increased crime rates, reduced clearance rates. Is that a trend we want to continue with? We're going down. And this is important. So where do we fit? I showed you our comparators. You probably go, yeah, sure. Well, we know what the crime looks like, but where do we sit in terms of other people's budget? Remember, green is Peterborough, right? So this is our comparators. Barrie is yellow, Thunder Bay is orange, Guelph is fuchsia, Kingston is gray, Brantford is blue, Peterborough, well, we're green. Maybe green with envy, but we're green. We're here. So what's this one on the far right mean? Well, from 2018 to 2022, that's how much each budget has gone up in each one of our comparators. And that's where we are right there compared to our comparators in terms of the investment in public safety in our community. Since 2018, compared to where we're seeing our comparators, that's where we are. That's important. I think that's important. I'm not saying we're going to fix this all in 1 year, but I think we need to start to make a move in the right direction. I'm not making this up. This is where we are. So this is where we start to get into the difficult pieces of things for me. I don't relish standing before you talking about this. This is the bare bones to keep the lights on in policing right now in this city. The bottom corner here is going to tell you what that is. 11.7% police budget increase. I'm going to break it down to you. What does that mean? What's that come out of your wallet? What does that impact on me as a taxpayer? We're going to talk about that. But that's what it means for us just to keep the lights on in this organization. Not add an extra officer to help us prepare for the future. Not add an extra officer to help us respond to those 911 calls and get them back down to 6 minutes. That's not that. This is just to keep the lights on. Things we cannot control. Things every other councillor and every other commissioner spoke of as those uncontrolled costs, right? So this here, you're probably going, what is Optic? That's our record management system. We have to have a record management system. This is managed as probably the least, well, I'll tell you, it's the least technically savvy way I'd like to do business, but it's the one we're into. And to change at this particular time would be ridiculously expensive. So here we are. And they're about to jump our cost. They're going to double it from $85 a user to $170 a user. No extra functionality. Just that's the cost of doing business. Who manages that? Well, it's provincially managed, JTS, the Justice Technical Service, something along that lines. Optic's a board, and they decide who and how much we have to pay for that. Insurance premiums, we're self-insured, but by saying we are self-insured, meaning the city insures the police, we're one of the ABCs for the police, right? So the police, rather, for the city. So the city insures us, but that's going up by nearly 33%. That's an additional $60,000. Fuel costs, well, that's gone up, but it's gone up for everybody. I get that. This is nothing new. This is what everybody else is looking at. But that's another $39,000, almost $40,000. We know legal fees continue to go up. People sue the police because we're the ones that interact with them. Very rarely are people suing fire and EMS, but they're suing us. We have to do this piece. Office lease, this one here, PTS fees, so that's our IT support. That one is a bit of a challenge for me. like I told you, a bit of an IT person. I'm not confident we're getting the bang for our buck, not because we don't have good people there, just because we're restricted by what we have in terms of the dollars and cents. Right? Remember our backup server next to our primary server in the room with no fire suppression, that sort of stuff. Right? New chief of police, some of you will have heard me say this. I announced as chief of police on November 9th. I arrived on January 9th. It took me half a day to be able to log into my computer. That's the chief of police. Can't log into his computer for half a day. It took me 3 more weeks to be able to access network drives. As the chief of police. If the chief of police is at that, how are we doing with everybody else? My first paycheck, I'm looking at it, I'm going, this is kind of crazy. What's happening here? How come where's all the money going? I said to my HR, we have an HR person who manages our payroll. I said, hey, Lorian, can you have a look at my pay stub? I'm not sure that something's right here. And she said, Chief, I'd really like to, but we're not allowed to look at your pay stubs. The city manages all of that. I said, what do you mean? We have an HR person. That's your job. No, the IT restricts us for what we're allowed to do. How does that make sense? How are we having the best efficiency here? But that's going up. And I think that the people that are there, we have quality people in there. Some of them are very overtasked. We have one individual assigned to us from the city, and Ryan is his name, and he is overtasked. But that guy works hard. You will have heard me talk about him in January, and you will have heard it earlier this year. That guy takes his computer with him on vacation so he can provide remote service to the police. That guy works hard, but he is overtasked. We have other things that are increasing, step increase, so that's, of course, negotiated salaries. We can't adjust that. It's a collective bargaining agreement. Anybody who's been in the union environment, maybe you are currently in a union environment, you know what that's all about and where that's coming from, so that's in there. WSIB costs are up. The city did a slight change into the way they do their WSIB costs. I will say it was the right thing to do. It's just a terrible year to do it. So the police have enjoyed here in Peterborough this little bubble. As I told you, we're a Schedule II employer. I'm going to give you the down and dirty. You're going to hear behind the curtain. We were a Schedule II employer. But the city paid the city paid 85% of our WSIB costs and the administrative costs. We only had to absorb 15% of that in our police budget. That was sitting pretty for a police service. That kept our numbers artificially low. It did not reflect the true cost of policing. And this year, the city has trued that up. And they went back to 2022, and they said, hey, we'll make it look the same in 2022 so that it doesn't look like as big a jump. It's the right thing to do. We need to know what the true cost of policing is. But I can tell you, it is a swift kick in the pants when we're already asking for other money. But it was the right thing to do, just a terrible time to do it. But you need to know what the true cost of policing is, because we haven't had that in this city. There's a big chunk of change right there. That's important. And retiree benefits, of course. These are people who work their entire life, as you know, and that's indexed and that goes up with as part of their pension. That's where you get to this 11.7. I don't know where I would cut that. I'm not cutting it from salaries. We can't cut it from negotiated salaries. I need a record management system. We need fuel in the cars to drive them around. I'm trying to buy hybrids. Hybrid cars are $10,000 more than a regular car. So there's an immediate capital outlay. It's like, where are we getting this? And you already know we have less officers than we did in 2018. So if somebody says, cut your police service, that comes at a cost. And my board knows this. And I've heard some of the city councilors talk about this. Right? That'll trigger. You try and reduce the size of a police service, that triggers an act, Section 39 under the Police Services Act. And that says if you want to do that, then you have to apply and you have to prove that you can still provide adequate and effective policing. Given that our crime rates are going up, our clearance rates are going down, can you say we can provide adequate and effective policing with fewer people by cutting the size of the service? And 90% of us is salary. These are the things we need to contemplate. So, okay, here we are. From a police perspective, this is the good. The police service, prior to my arrival, they had KPMG come in and do a study and say, you need 49, you'll have heard this number come out, you need 49 new people over 5 years. They divvied this up over 5 years. You've heard we had 11 in 2023, 14 were earmarked in 2024, and so on until we get to the 5 years done. So what does that look like? Well, that's the salaries for the combined number of people that KPMG suggested we should have. We rejigged some of the people because we had only one special constable allocated for 2024. But as I just told you, the courts have changed the way they're operating. They've increased their courtroom capacity, which means we have to increase our staffing capacity to provide the security that the Police Services Act says we do. We don't have an option. So this is where some of that comes in. So what I've tried to do is say, and this is where I lean on Tia, and she holds me true. She will not let me fumble with any numbers. So thank you, Tia. Right? So I said, Tia, what is the impact on the taxpayer? We know the City Council gave a range, and at the top end of that range was 5.5. Right? This is the range. Work within it. That includes all-inclusive. That's your operating budget. That's your capital budget. Where do you sit? And I said, okay, what's our impact? This is 14. What's that impact on people? It's $80 per year. Now, where do we get that number? Well, one of our councillors asked our treasurer, how much is half a point increase in the budget? And he said, $20. Okay, so we got four $20 here. There's our $80. So I was looking to see, okay, so what does that come out to? Now, variety of things. My wife said she got her hair done and a toner. That was like $79. It's probably pretty inexpensive. I looked at that and I said, that's almost 2 rounds of golf at a local golf course. Depending who you are in the room, that's 2 cases of beer for $80. Remember, 52% of the city said they don't feel safe. And the 71% said it affects what they do and where they do it. $80 for a hair toner. And then I looked and I couldn't even believe that it's more to get a manicure or a pedicure. You can't even get a mani-pedi for that, which was surprising. But I was trying to see, how does this affect? How is this going to affect my wallet, my wife's wallet, your wallet, the community's wallet? Because I absolutely appreciate this has hard consequences. So that's the good from a policing perspective. That's everything we could want this year. This is the bad. Relative speaking, of course, compared to the good. This cuts the 14 down to 7, redistributes them slightly on where we can put people. By the way, we do need a forensics person because, as I talked to you about, there's forensics in everything we do, right? At one time, if we had said forensics and CSI, people would have been tripping over themselves going, oh my God, that's the best show on TV right now. Look at all the spin-offs. CSI. We got to have people there. So this is important. That's $60. So I know that's about roughly the price of a round of golf and a small bucket of balls for the driving range for the year. In terms of beers, that's like a case of beer and a pack of smokes. For those that drink lattes, well, that's a few more lattes. But as you can see, it's $60 a year is where that's coming to provide that additional public safety. Now this is the ugly. This is just to keep the lights on. We looked at the 11.7. I will be asking you for some help at the end of this presentation when we turn the lights back on. I will be asking for that because just to keep the lights on is $50. This puts 7 more people in your police service contributing towards public safety. That's $60, $10 more. This gets you nothing. And because this gets you nothing, I have to stop doing something. And that's where I'm going to be asking for your assistance. Because if we go to this, I have to ask you, what do you want me to stop doing? Because I have people who need to do these jobs. I have court security I have to provide. I have forensics that need to be done. Technical work. We talked about the digital footprint. Every single crime happens. I'm going to be asking for your help. And help me make an informed decision when I go to my board. Because the community has great expectations. Right? You have great expectations. You want to have an officer be at the right response for the right time, with the right information to solve all problems and enforce law. And when I say solve all problems, we get asked to solve everything. Because you want a safer community. You expect us to be patrolling our streets. I know that because it's a perennial top 10, top 5, top 3 complaint to the city, to the police, safer roads. You expect that. Then you expect us to be seen in the community. And in fact, I expect us to be in the community. The province does, the Police Services Act does, because that's how we engage with proactive policing and crime prevention. So remember when I showed you this, whoops, and I showed you where are all the people? When we get into this next phase of things, this is where the people are going to have to move from or be cut from. I don't want a single person to have to lose that. And when I ask you for some of these things, I think you're going to say, well, no, I need to have officers doing traffic enforcement because the roads are creating a problem for us. I know that because the councillors are sending me the radar and the speeding complaints and the stop sign complaints. And we're going to come back to this. So I have some thoughts, and I don't endorse any one of these, but these are things that other agencies have looked at. These are things that I'm looking at to say, should we be doing this? And I'll be looking for your input here. Should we stop doing criminal record checks? Right? People did do this for job and for employment. But I can say, hey, listen, go to Coburg, because they'll do that for you. I don't need to employ those people to do those background checks. I can use those people to do something else in the organization that needs to be done. But what's the impact? Well, we're going to have to repurpose those people, and you're going to have to go somewhere else to get that background check. Well, we could stop dedicated traffic enforcement, but we just had the whole conversation around what your expectations are in terms of traffic safety. And I know there's a counselor in here. I don't see where you are right now. I won't out you, but I know you and I have been on a long email train on a particular stretch of road and about speeding on that stretch of road. Now, there is an impact financially to the city if we do that, right? When we write tickets, people think the police are getting that money. We don't get the money, it goes to the city. So there's a revenue impact on that. If our ticket production goes down, we don't write out there. There is no expected quota on writing tickets. But what we do write does have an impact to the city. We could stop doing community service to some extent. And school liaison. I can tell you I was a school liaison officer. I totally support this program. And I know in all other jurisdictions where they have cut that out, they're now saying, help, we need the police back in the schools. And we don't sit there in the schools, we visit the schools. There's no police officer station in every school. That's a sort of misconception around what the school resource does. They just visit the schools. They are a dedicated resource. They are like your MCIT, only for your kids. Because they're the ones who get to know the principals, they get to know the kids, they know how to diffuse those situations. I was one of those. I totally support that. That is crime prevention at its best. Because if you can build good relationships when people are young, those turn into healthy adults when they get older. And I can tell you with certainty, and I sat on a committee in my last job where a school board was asking for this back and police services were saying, sorry, but we have repurposed those positions. I can't put them back in the school. We can stop all non-core. So I showed you those 6 things. We can stop doing that. We can stop going to those calls that are put in as community service. We can stop going to suspicious persons, assist citizens, unless there's a criminal component attached to it. If you say to me, this is chief, this is what you need to do. When somebody calls 911, unless there's a criminal component to it, stop doing it. You can do that. Some other suggestions, we could reduce our proactive investigations. So these are other things that we do. We get grants for some of this stuff, thankfully, right? But we go out and we hunt people who are trafficking in human beings, people taking advantage of some of our most vulnerable people. We are on the hunt for those predators because they present a danger in our community. But we could wait till it's reported, I suppose. I wouldn't advocate for that. Same as our hate crime. We'll be putting out a press release, so you'll remember some of those hate crimes, the flyers that were going around our community. Stay tuned for a press release on that. Positive information coming out of there. Great work by officers and investigators sworn in, our civilian members, everybody involved in that. Drug investigations, people who are peddling toxic poison in our communities. We could stop proactively looking for that. I don't advocate for that. But it's something we could do if you would say this is your mandate. We could reduce gas consumption. This is a big one. You saw the gas prices are going up. We're spending a lot more money on that. We could respond. That's how other first responders do it. Some of the favorites, they come from their station and they respond. But we already know that when you call 911 and the vast majority of the calls come to the police for 911, you expect us to get there faster than 7.4 minutes, I would suspect. We aren't going to get there that quick if we're responding from the station. That comes at a cost as well. Extending the life of the vehicles, we are doing that now. That comes at a cost. We're just pushing the ball down the field. So we increase maintenance costs as the cars get older. We postpone replacing a prisoner transport van. We extend the life of that, but we need a prisoner transport van. That vehicle costs. We gave that money back to the city as part of a capital return. We're still going to need it. So this is where we're going to need some suggestions. Cue the lights. And this is where I'm coming to you. Because I've wanted to give you the facts. I committed to giving you the information. I committed to giving you the good, the bad, the ugly. I can tell you there are things I just discovered on Friday. My building. So the officers all keep a notebook. You have seen us write in our notes. Do you know where we keep those notebooks? In a room on the roof of the police station. When our staff have to go get their books, they have to go outside onto the roof of the police station to get into another room to get their books. I have rental space in a storage unit here, I won't tell you where, but we store major case files there. Homicide investigations, police clothing. I have vehicles stored at all kinds of locations because I have no other place to put them. I have officers sitting in an office off-site somewhere, I can't tell you where, because they have no place to put them. So I'm looking for you to help me. Because there was a motion made to the community, to the council, that public health and police be kept to a 4.08% increase in their operating budget. I'm saying I got 11.7. And that means zero growth. That's keeping the lights on. That's not addressing the crime rates, not addressing the clearance rates. What am I going to do? Because for me to get there, I have to stop doing something else. And I need your help because I don't have the answers. You deserve the type of police service that makes you feel safe. 52% of the people in this community say they don't feel safe. I don't know if Terry's here, but we have a downtown business association that says, I want more business downtown. A healthy downtown is a vibrant community. I want that too. That's why it's red. It's the heart of the city. How do we keep that heart healthy? How do we keep the community healthy? This is where I'm going to put it out to you and say, help. Do you have any suggestions? What would you have me do? Because that's where we currently sit. That's what I'm going to present to my board, subject to your feedback today. I don't know where the board's going to go. My job is to present an option to the board. This is what I need for public safety in our community. I have a very supportive board, a board who knows what it's going to cost. But I know they are also very well aware of the restraints and the fiscal tightness that our city is facing. And I can't blame them for that. That's a reality. So you got the good, $80. You got the bad, $60. You got the ugly, $50. Just to keep the lights on at $50. $60 at least is 7 people. If we go down to 4.08, we are cutting service. We are cutting the size of this organization. That will require a push to the Ontario Civilian Police Commission. That will require some sort of a hearing to determine whether or not we can produce adequate and effective policing. So you're probably saying, well, who else has done that? Smith Falls last tried that. They tried to reduce the size of their police service by 1 officer. 1, because they had great clearance rates. And the courts came back and they said, you know what? Clearance rates aren't the best measure. Crime rate is. What's our city? Is your city safe? Can you provide that? And they didn't win that argument. Now, I heard Councillor Riel bring it up in a council meeting. Councillor Riel, I heard you say it. If we don't give the cops what they want, they can take us to court. I heard you say it. You're right. The board can do that if they choose to do that. And as the mayor said, and I heard him say it, he's quite right, the city has to be able to prove that they can't afford to pay that. So who else has done that? Guelph tried that. In the last 25 years, Guelph did that. And they came back and they said, yeah, you know what? This is what they're asking for, but this is what they need. That didn't go so well. Now, when I went to London, they were on the precipice of one of these as well. And at the last minute, they changed the process and they said, you know what, we're not going there. It's expensive. It generates a lot of hard feelings and it addresses public safety. Where are you gonna go? Now, I needed a full 2 hours to have this conversation with you. I would normally get 7.5 minutes in city council. So you can see why I'm here, because you deserve to hear this. The community deserves to hear this. You deserve to hear the good, the bad, the ugly. You deserve to see what's going on behind the scenes. Where are our people? I want you to have some input into that. And so at this point, if you have any questions, I will answer questions. If you have any suggestions, I will take some. Yeah, go ahead, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Right. So I think for a lot of people within the community, that would be prices rising. I understand PTSD. And I understand there are reasons for it to be legislation. However, when that changed in 2016, I don't believe the province or WSIB did a very good job whatsoever in implementing programs that actually address the issue. Yeah, I agree. Mm-hmm. I don't think a lot of people understand that WSIP is tax-free. It goes on tax return one line comes out as deduction. In 2017, Peterborough Police wrote a policy for PTSD. It's 23 pages long. It says that it's in fact a living document. I was able to find it on the website, December 2022. Because since we removed from the website, has Peterborough Police, as an organization, made improvements to their PTSD policy. For example, when the policy was originally written, the only recommended psychologist in Peterborough was Tuffy Smith, policeman. Yet we have Bryson Kelly in Peterborough. We have Gateway right on Lansdowne in Peterborough that caters to first responders that have PTSD. Yep. I'm not sure that the injured employees would be aware of that because they go home injured, they're isolated, they're removed from the workplace, and they have to actually advocate for themselves, even to find out about Gateway. And we have officers who use Gateway, just so you know. So that is something we're talking about, what's available in the city in terms of some treatment and counseling and help for people who are suffering with PTSD. Please carry on. Because some of those individuals that are off with those injuries, they've been trying to go to Homework. Right. Not even knowing that Gateway is here in Peterborough. Yep. They have wonderful organizations like Boots on the Ground. We have Wounded Warriors. So I guess my question is, Peterborough Police as an organization, it's a living document. It's not available on your website anymore. Has the documenting changed, improved? Has your internal policies become more proactive to work with your employees who are costing taxpayers probably 1.72 actually get them in a better mental state? Yeah, absolutely. So the short answer to that is yes, and it is in progress and it is working. As you say, it's a living document. So kind of stealing a bit of my thunder here because I haven't done a full announcement yet. Sorry, I'm talking to the chair of my board right now. We haven't done a full notice and a full... No, actually, about the fact that we've just partnered up with Wounded Warriors to help with that. So, cat's out of the bag. Sorry, Chair, I didn't get it to you in a board meeting yet, but we have partnered with Wounded Warriors to provide some of that. Boots in the ground, absolutely. I know the people who were involved in setting that up from my previous organization. Gateway, we have officers who take advantage of that. You're right, there is a position identified for this year around disability management and employee wellness. So that's also in there. So there is a whole host of that. We have reinvigorated our peer support program. It's starting to get off the ground. They're the ones who brought me Wounded Warriors as an option. So to your point, yes, there's more we can do. Now, I can't say a lot more on this next point, but I will say, please bear with me, because I happen to have a friend, and you talk about friends, who is the president and CEO of WSIB. And he and I are talking about some options we might be able to bring to our city that other cities as a pilot program to benefit the people in our community and the officers who are suffering. And I can't say more than that right now because we're just in the preliminary stages of that, but it's something we're working on. So I'll take one more question, then I'm going to ask anybody else here. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No. By all means.
As the new chief of Peterborough, have you personally made any attempts to reach out to your injured employees that are home, that have been home for a long time?
Not who've been let home. So I typically work through my HR folks as far as who's best and the best means for contacting individuals. I take my guidance from them in terms of who that would be. I do understand that we do have members who sometimes feel as if they've been disconnected from the organization. That's not great. And I completely appreciate that. We need to get better at that. Absolutely. And that's part of the reason why I know that the association pushed very hard for this individual to come this year. It's a reason why I'm working on trying to bring in a special project here to help us at no cost to the Peterborough Police Service to help members who are on this. But I can't talk about that in any greater detail. It will be to help all members, whether they're off or whether they're active. It would be to help all our members. Yeah. Subject to anybody else, just please bear with me. Does anybody else have a question? So I'm going to have to park that for now. Yep, go ahead, Mark. Yep. Oh my goodness. Well, it fluctuates, of course, depending on the nature of why they're off. I told you out of our 148, we only have 100 and, what did I say, 120 that are now 124 that are currently deployable. Right, because it moves, right? Day to day it can move. Somebody's off, somebody's back. We had somebody who was here for 3 years, they just went off again. So it moves. Yeah. Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, 128% of their salary. Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Right. To backfill. Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Yep. It does. And those officers have done and seen some pretty terrible things. And I don't think any one of us can take away what they've been through and what they've seen. And you know what, Mark? It's not even just the officers. I quite often think our dispatchers, they suffer some of that trauma too because they get to hear it in the phone and they never get closure. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. We're up to 4 now. Well, we will be up to 4, thankfully. And you're right, because it's important. We have one finance person too. We are not an organization with a lot of fat in the system. We have very little. Now, we do utilize the services of the city and their HR folks help us with that as well as they can, but these are our staff. And your point is well taken. You're absolutely right. Yep. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Oh, I got a question at the back here, Mark, if you're done. Go ahead, sir. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm. Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. No. And I'll just say again, with more, we can do more. Crime analytics, absolutely key to ensuring we're in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing because we have the right information. And there's a reason that some of the successful police services have such low crime rates because that's what they're doing. I brought in, now at the time, he was a deputy chief at York Region. He's now the commissioner of the OPP. But I worked for him and brought in a data analytics unit to York Regional Police. They enjoy a crime rate that's less than half of ours for 1.3 million people. Because we made sure we put the right people in the right place at the right time with the right information. They are in the right locations. They are properly distributed. We track, because we don't have the ability to do that now. They track how much time are you spent responding to a call for service. We put in a proper metric. We said we want no more of an officer's time doing 40% responding to calls because I need them having 30% of their time doing proactive police in order to keep that reactive piece down. And when we get above 40%, it's time to look at, do we need to change the boundaries of where they're patrolling or do we need to add another officer? Because we expect to have this level of crime in our community. We need to establish, what do we expect? And are we okay with where we're at? I'm not. But I'm not the one who has to vote on that. My piece is to take your input. Are we happy with that? I'm going to come back to you. As long as you promise it's not WSIB, because I want to get some other people. Yeah, different question. All right, then Alex, I'll come to you next. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes and no. So what they will do is quite often have more than one. One special constable and one sworn officer. Quite often that's where you will have two people because you at least need to have somebody with a firearm there all night long. Absolutely. No, and keep in mind our auxiliary are completely volunteers. They all have day jobs or night jobs as the case might be. And man, they do a great job for us. Alex.
understanding
Mhm.
that people sense and safety and well-being is tied to things that aren't always
Right.
right. That's one thing.
Yep.
And my fear is that when you're asking for more money to dump into the system, that's
Mhm.
really serving
Right.
those things.
Mhm.
So I would think this is, and that would be my fear, putting more money into the system.
Yeah.
That's actually not working right now.
Well, I'd say the system's working. It's just not funded well enough to work as it should. But if I know where you're going, it's what do we stop doing and where should we fund those things?
Yeah, and I think that I would really be looking for like how are other cities collaborating with partners to fill those gaps
Mhm.
instead of just saying like we're going to stop it.
Yep.
Because this is a town hall, and I think that would be great to see our silos and find.
Yeah.
Because to me, it's like an efficiency. You're spending this much time, as you said, and laid out to us.
Yep.
Non-emergency or non-police-related calls. There not some responsibility for proactively looking at how to divert those calls?
Absolutely. And I have to have a place to divert them to. So great point. I'm glad you brought it up because a lot of those other cities that you're talking about, they have a fully funded, large or larger mental health response team, police and community together. That's funded so that we don't need the police interacting doing those calls because somebody else is doing them. I know as a duty inspector, so in York Region, because it's big, we have an inspector who sits and they're the sort of the chief of police when the chief isn't there. They manage everything that's on the road. I was one of those people, sat beside the communicators. And I would say to the dispatchers, yeah, we're not going to that call. Oh, that's a industrial accident. This individual got hurt at work. That's not a police matter. Don't send the police. That's Ministry of Labor. Send Ministry of Labor. Those are the things we can stop doing, but somebody has to pick it up. And I can tell you right now, and I know there are some 911 dispatchers in this room, they will get those calls. And I need my community to support me when I say we are no longer going to those calls. Do not call us. Do not call 911. Who are you going to call? I don't know. But don't call us because we can't afford to do that. And we shouldn't be. There's another body that should do that. I completely agree. There are some services that need to get funded. But the one thing you can't do, and it's unfortunate, and you're right, other police and other cities have tried to tackle this, and they said, we can't stop doing something while we build something else up. You got to build that up and then stop doing it. Because if I cut service out now and there isn't the infrastructure to take it, vulnerable people are going to fall through the cracks. That's the reality. I don't think anybody wants that. And I can tell you, there's no chief of police that I've spoken to says we are the right answer for everything, because we are not. We all know mental health is probably the best of all of that, to demonstrate that. So you're right, there is a spot we should go to, but who's going to fund it? And until we're ready to fund it, who are you going to call? Yeah, I heard that, Ghostbusters. I heard that. Yeah. Yeah, Gary at the back, and then we'll get to you. Yep.
Questions, Chief. Quite often councillors get questions from people about, can you just tell the chief to do something? I'm wondering if you could explain to those in the audience the difference between an ask and operational matters that
Sure.
Go to the chief of police.
Yep.
Second question, I'd like to know, Chief, what's the best part of your job?
Okay, well, the chief, so Gary asked me first off to explain what the council can and can't tell me to do. So the council cannot tell me to do anything. Just full stop. So when you send in a message to your councilor and you say, can you tell the chief to do this? The answer is full stop, no. I cannot. The end. The board says to me, Chief, this is what we want you to do. The chief says this is how we're going to do it. But I answer to the board and the board only. And they are my governance. I am the operations. That's the way it goes. And the board doesn't even have the authority to tell police officers what to do. I'm the only one they can tell what to do. And they say, Chief, we want you to accomplish this. And I say, okay, we're going to figure out how to accomplish that. So that's that one. I don't know that that's going to take you off the hot seat, but hopefully there'll be people watching who realize they can't have the councillor or the mayor. Mayor, you got to tell the chief he's got to do this. And I know you get those messages.
Good, bad message, Chief. I just wanted to be
Yeah,
clear, and
yeah.
I appreciate the answer very much. And the best part of your job, I love to have you in.
Yeah, you know what? I love what I do every single day. There's no aspect of what I do that I don't love. I don't love the bad times, quite honestly. I know I've got a couple of my friends here. I call them my friends now. The inspectors here in the station. They hear me say, policing is not just my job; it's my hobby. This is what I love to do. When I am not at work, I am working. I am logging at least between 80 and 100 hours a week in a 7-day period because I love what I do. I don't feel like I work a day. My wife has a different opinion of that. I can tell you, my son has a different opinion of that. But that's what I love to do. That's why I'm here, because I truly believe in what we do. I really do. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, no, hold on, Mark. We got somebody behind you there.
Chief, I just want to say thank you very much. This was really enlightening, and I wouldn't even presume to come with any kind of suggestions for you because I have no idea, absolutely none. But my thought is, what, as a concerned community member, can I do to support you and your police service in getting the budget that you want?
Well, and it's not even that I want it, I need it, but I appreciate the support. So that is, what can we do as a community to support you in getting the budget you want? And this is a forum for that, is to say, hey, this is what we want. As a city, this is what we want. Because my board is here, and they will hear that. This is me coming to my board to say, I have input from the community, as many as I've got at least, and I thank you all for being here. And my board puts forward the budget. And there's some interesting things about that, because city council cannot look at the line items and say, cut this, cut this, cut this, cut this, because the Police Services Act prevents that. It says, no, you can't do that. They can just say, we either support this budget or we don't. And that's kind of where we sit. So feedback like that is, I think, crucial. What do we want? I think just letting your board, your police services board know, and letting the council know this is what we want. This is what we expect. And I can tell you, if that's what you want, and that's what we want to deliver, I want to be in a position to come back next year and say, here's what we were able to accomplish. Keeping in mind, if I wanted to hire officers today, it takes me 13 to 16 months before they're even on the street. So there is a lag time there. But there are some quick wins that we can make along the way in the meantime. Right? We have done great things with government grants. Some great things: CCTV cameras, in-car cameras, government grants. We've applied for a bail safety grant so we can keep track of the people who are in our community who pose the greatest risk to our public safety. You hear me talk about that. There's a grant out there to try and get some technology to allow us to do that. There are 3 police services right now who have that technology: the OPP, Toronto Police, and Durham Police. Toronto created it. They partnered with Durham to make sure it would work with another police service. OPP jumped on board. And now it's up for a grant for police services to jump on that. I said, absolutely, my hand is up. I want a safer community. I want access to that technology. Here's what I need to get that. My hand is there asking. Because when I go to the OPP here in our city and I say, Inspector Galeazza, I know you got access to this. What's going on? And they go, well, do you know about this guy who lives downtown? He committed all his gun crimes in Toronto, but he's been court ordered to live here at this address in Peterborough downtown. I go, I had no clue. Now, I'll bet you expect that the police would know that. You probably would expect we know where those people are in our community who we should be afraid of. But how do we know? Nobody's telling us. Nobody's sharing that information. This technology will allow for that, which is why my hand is up. I am right there in front of the line. Please help us. On the same token, my other hand is up saying, hey, there's a grant opportunity coming up for hate crime. How can we create and how can we enhance how we create and do those investigations? How can we educate people what that is and isn't? How can we help and partner with the community to provide education? Because it's not all heavy-handed. We also want to get into, how do we help? How can we educate? How can we partner? I don't have the money for that. The city does not have the money for that. If I don't get those grants, those don't happen. Because I just don't have the money. The money for the CCTV cameras, that wasn't coming from anywhere else, and yet it helped us solve 2 homicides in 6 days. It's amazing what we can do with a little bit of technology and the right amount of money. Hold on, I'm going to come back to you in a sec, sir. I just got, Mark, here.
So if I was asked,
Yep, if you were asked,
what is more important,
yes.
to fund a twin pad arena, okay, or to have a safer community? And
Sounds
you were
like a
to debate
rhetorical
that,
question to me, Mark.
And you were to
Doesn't
debate
sound like one
that.
you would
No,
need an answer
this
for
is
me.
not to you, but this is to council. And it is about priorities in our community. I would think the majority of people in this room would automatically say, I'd much rather have a safer community, or not to skimp on safety in our community for our children, for our seniors and residents in this area. Because what you shared with us is, you say, this is a slippery slope. And we are on the downtrend of a safe community.
Yeah. Yep. I can't say it better than that. I'm going to leave that alone. I'm going to come to the back of the room, and then I'll come to you guys over here, please. Thanks. Yes, sir.
I've been downtown for 25 years, business owner, local business owner, and
Yep.
I would say we're at a crisis level down there right now.
Yep.
I talk to people every day, business owners, when I'm coming in, they're exhausted.
Yep.
We're all exhausted dealing with mental health issues that we're not trained to deal with, drug addiction issues that we're not trained to deal with, violence that we're not trained to deal with. Our staff are being attacked. We're getting stolen from daily.
Yeah.
We're having our stores broken into.
Yep.
And I see the stats, and you're saying the crime levels in all the different areas seem to be pretty even. I would agree. Sure, your stats say it. I would say what's happening downtown is fairly aggressive right now. And I'm just curious, what's the plan down here? Because everyone is scared, and you've got to look at the composition of the business owners that are opening businesses now. I don't have the stat. I would put most of them at women-owned. If we have women opening business all the time down there, and they're having to deal with this as a single person sitting in a store by themselves,
Yep.
we're at a crisis level.
Yeah,
We're
so
going to start having people close. We're going to start losing the downtown, as you've called the heart of the city.
Yeah. So-
What's the game plan here to get people feeling safe again and wanting to come downtown?
So the question there, if everybody didn't hear, is what's the game plan for downtown? Right? We know that's a concern, right? Heart of the city. I don't disagree. My wife works downtown. I can tell you that right now. She has been accosted downtown. Tell you that. She was born and raised here. This is not the city she grew up in, but no city is the city that we grew up in. None of them. I grew up in Scarborough. I don't live there in Scarborough anymore, but that's where I grew up. I can tell you, none of them. So what are we doing? Well, there's a few things we're going to do. One, I had hinted to some of the councillors before this meeting started. I do have something in the works. I need to socialize the city to what that's going to be, because there are some drastic changes to how we deal with certain things, especially around open drug use. Okay? Because I don't want to be driving past that. I can tell you, my officers, they don't want to be driving past that. We feel it. My officers feel it. They know it. They feel the same sense of helplessness. You will have seen things where we put people before the courts, and because we have the right to be presumed innocent before guilty, we have a ladder system for bail. And Paul, you probably, oh, he's already left. The Crown left, so I can really say it. No, I'm kidding. We have the bail system, a ladder system, right? The least onerous method for holding somebody in custody and to ensure their appearance in court is what we have to release them on, right? So this is where we're at. It's a challenge. We are trying to put the right resources downtown where we can. I know when I talk to some of the DBIA folks, they say, we have noticed a difference downtown, but we aren't going to solve the problem alone. We do need to be partners in that. It's a complex issue of many things, as you said, addictions, drug use, homelessness, they all come together. In the downtown, that is the bulk of what our calls are. There's no question about it. Sometimes those calls are, I just don't feel comfortable. I don't like the look of this person. What I'm saying to you, is that a police matter? Because I don't like the look. And that person kind of gives me that, when I'm walking past them, maybe I don't feel safe. From a city safety perspective and a city council that's trying to attract people downtown, I'm going to say, yeah, I need to make sure that my people feel safe in the community. But if they haven't committed a criminal offense, what am I going to do? Now, there's some things I can do. As I said, I'm kind of working towards that. I can't spell that out yet. We're just pulling and I have somebody right now, to Alex, to your point, going to another police service to say, hey, you've recently implemented this. Let's get the nuts and bolts. Let's get the details of that. How can we work that here? So stay tuned for that. There will be an announcement. It's not going to make everybody happy, but it will make the majority of people happy. So please stay tuned for that. Okay? I just need to make sure I have all the I's dotted and the T's crossed. So I know we had questions here. Yes, go ahead.
I do have a suggestion and also, oh, thank you. That's great. Great, thank you. So a suggestion and also a question. So
I'll repeat the question here, so go ahead.
okay, yeah, I appreciated Alex bringing up, the idea of maybe having different partner organizations where some of the calls can be diverted to.
Yeah.
And I also think it's really important for the city to be focusing on prevention.
Yep.
In your presentation, you mentioned that you're really focused on an increase in nonviolent crime. So I think you mentioned like theft, break-ins, this type of thing. And I think one of the biggest issues our city is facing is the housing crisis, and just lack of employment opportunities, mental health crisis opportunities. And so I think if the city were able to focus more on these preventative things, having people being able to live and have the resources to survive without maybe feeling like they need to resort to crime, theft. I think that would be,
Okay.
more of a long-term solution
Agreed.
than this idea of, solving crime as the police, arresting people or charging people for these things. Just a little personal anecdote. My mother's car was recently stolen. And, she found out that the folks who had stolen the car, didn't have any home address. So maybe these folks were homeless, they're looking for shelter. And so I think, just, how can our city provide more affordable housing opportunities and maybe looking at that as a means of crime prevention.
What's the question though, or is that?
No, that's the
That was it?
suggestion.
Oh,
That's
okay, the suggestion, okay. And you said you had a question.
Yeah, I have the other question I have was I noticed that out of the 11% increase that you're looking at, 7.7% is going towards these increases in salaries that are union negotiated. And I'm just curious about how that works. Just my understanding as taxpayers, technically we might be the employers of the police services, and so I'm wondering how those get negotiated. A couple of years ago, we did a little bit of background research and noticed that 88 officers out of 138 or something were on the Ontario Sunshine List, making over $100,000.
Every city in this province, exactly the same stats.
Yeah. So and just thinking about that too. I work in a nonprofit organization, and the salaries are much lower than that.
Sure.
And so, just kind of curious.
So
about how that
if I can, so to recapture that, the question is, how does that work for the collective bargaining that turns into those salary increases? So just like every other unionized environment where the association, right?
Just to clarify, the question is where is like the community's bargaining power in that negotiation as well?
Well, you are the ones who, provide to the council what your expectations are around the budget. That's included in the cost, and that's factored into the CBA, so the collective bargaining agreements, right? So that's where your input comes in, into that piece of things. I can tell you we are paid no more, no less than any other police service. Everybody's pretty much on the same. If I want to be a police officer anywhere in this province, doesn't matter where I go, I'm going to make the same amount of money. The question is, why do I want to do it in Peterborough? Because I'm about to lose up to 10 officers by the end of this year. Why do I want to be a police officer here when I could go to North Bay and make the same amount of money? I could go to somewhere, a smaller community with less crime, less likelihood that somebody's going to spit at me, fight me, punch me, do whatever. Why do I want to go there and make the same amount of money? Why do I want to be here? For the same reason I'm here, because I want to be here. Right? But not everybody does. So this is the problem. So some of those steps, so we started hiring, and police services started hiring on a staggered approach to salaries as a cost containment approach, right? So we hire and we say, hey, you're going to budget at 4th class because that's the lowest pay rate for a constable. And that's where we're going to budget. So that hits this year. But next year, they have a pay increase and they go to 3rd class. And so now everybody else you hire is coming in at 4th, but now you're going to pay the difference to 3rd. And you're just going to continue to accumulate your salaries. Now, once upon a time, we hired everybody at 1st class, and we said, this is what it's going to cost because we want to smooth the budget, and we don't want to have those constant increases every year. This year, we said, hey, you can hire half the people you need to hire in September to contain some of those costs. So when we talked about that wellness person, that is a September hire. That's not an earlier in the year hire. That's a cost containment piece to help with that, to help offset the pressures on the city and the taxpayer. Right? So there is some of that goes along with that, but every police officer is bargained and makes approximately the same amount. And I can tell you, it's the same with fire, it's the same with EMS. But only one is going to run into a building where somebody's shooting a gun. Only one is going to have to go hands-on and arrest somebody who just killed somebody. That's us. Nobody else is doing that. Not a single one of them. When EMS goes to a call and they say it's violent, they are not going there without the police present because we are the ones. When fire needs to go put out a fire, and it might be at a homeless encampment, and they say, we can't go there because it's going to be violence, who do they call? One, the police. We are the one. And that's what we get paid for. And there's not a single one of us that begrudges that because that's what we know, that's what we signed up to do. And I can tell you, today's officer is more sophisticated than when I got hired. When I got hired, and the people in my generation got hired, we said, we want to put bad guys in jail. That's why we became cops. That was our what we grew up with. Today's community officer who gets hired says, I want to give back to the community. I want to help people. I want to serve. They are a more sophisticated recruit than I ever was, because they have a more altruistic reason about why they want to get there and the good things they know they can do. I guess I wanted to do the same thing. I just didn't necessarily have the same level of sophistication to be able to articulate that's what I wanted to do, because it would have the same end. I think today's officer knows better, and they know they can't solve everything the way we used to solve it. Times have changed, and for the better. Somebody right behind you had a question too. Hopefully that helps. Yes, sir.
Got a couple of questions. One, I think you might be able to answer quickly. Just roughly, including the grants that you get, which I know will probably fluctuate because some you're not going to get.
I'm sorry, I missed that. Including which?
Including the grants that you might get from the provincial
the grants,
governments.
yes.
Because they might fluctuate. You might be unsuccessful on some and others. But what percentage of your operating budget, where does it come from? And then I have a second question for you.
Okay, so revenue, we lump that in with grants and different revenue sources. It's about 12%? Yeah, there we go. About 12% of our budget comes from revenue, which includes grants. So we do get a grant for the for the court security, prisoner transportation. That is probably, 70% paid for? Approximately 70% paid for. I'm looking to my finance person because she's the numbers whiz here for me, and I don't want to give you false information. But that's approximately what we recover from that. But that fluctuates. Right? And it fluctuates year to year. It's not even stable. And the way it's structured, the least efficient you are, the more money you get, which is kind of bizarre, but that's how it's structured. If you can show, because essentially you can demonstrate a need, you're less efficient, so you must need more money. There's no way to do business, but yet that's what we get rewarded with. Okay, question 2, sorry, because I know we're past 8:30 and people have had to leave. So.
Sorry, my next question.
And I had to pay for this hall, so I don't want to get charged overtime for that.
Okay. Well, I'm like Mike Watt. I have a downtown business that
Yes.
I had a robbery from. My house was broken into a number of years ago. A couple of months ago, there were 2 elderly ladies in our neighborhood, both broken into, 85, 86 years old. Alex and Joy, if Joy's here,
Yes.
kindly came and sat and listened to our neighborhood and the concerns that we have in our neighborhood. The elephant in the room was about appropriate spending, the twin pad arenas versus the safety of our city. That came up. The analogy was used, the ship is sinking and you need to plug the holes in the ship rather than refurbishing the first class lounge was the
Okay.
analogy that was used. But my question to you,
Thank you. Yeah.
what do homeowners have to do whilst you're wrestling with budgets and trying to get more money out of the city, the province, wherever it needs to come from?
Right.
What do us as homeowners do and those 86-year-olds do to feel safer in their homes?
Right.
They don't, and just to give you context, they don't have internet. They can't get cameras. They can't get security systems that easily.
So there's a few things I would say to that. So what can people do to feel safer in their homes? And in your case, you're talking about a very specific situation, and I can appreciate that. Where I would go with that is a few things. So one thing that the police do offer, it's crime prevention component. It's thanks to our auxiliary members. We do crime prevention through environmental design or home safe. We will come out to people's homes and provide an audit of your physical environment and provide you with, say, here's what you can do. Some of those will come at no cost. Some will say, hey, listen, increase your lighting. Some might say trim up the branches on these trees so that you are visible from the street. We call it natural surveillance. So some of those things we can offer at no cost because our auxiliary members do that for us at no cost. And that's all available. So it is there. It's not the panacea. I absolutely get that. I do have people who say to me, when I say to them, you should put a club on your car so it doesn't get stolen. You got one now. I know. My chair of my board sent me a message. Chief, I got a club. I said, thank you. Right? That's important. Help us help you. Take some of those advice opportunities. I get people say to me, I shouldn't have to lock my car. People shouldn't go through it. I don't disagree. They shouldn't. But the reality is, we have to do those things. And not everybody wants to do those things. I absolutely get it. I can't address, and I'm torn on the twin pads, Mayor, just so you know on that, because I too believe that things like that, investments like that, draw people to our community. They truly do. And so it becomes, how do I trade off one for the other? How can I get both? How do I do that? I'm in a building that it's long since been overgrown. I had officers out in hallways doing their work where the public would come in because I simply have no space. You heard me tell you, well, you've seen the pictures. We flood in the back parking lot, right? We pay for those types of things, but that's not serving our needs. And it's not just about having a nice place to work. It's about like the basics. My officers are on the roof to get their notebooks, for Pete's sake. Whose business is doing that? I have an IT. I don't have those IT services. 3 weeks to get access as the chief of police. That's not right. So these are things that we need to do if we're going to encompass, and I really do believe it has to be holistic. It really does. But we have to look and say we can't keep stealing from Peter to pay Paul. And I do believe it has to encompass all of it. I know that's not a great answer for you, but at least it's what I can offer you. And please, if you do know those folks, and I believe that the officer who was with you when you guys met with Joy and met with Alex, he's in this room, and you can certainly reach out. I can connect you to him, I believe, and we can sort of talk about SEPTED and what that might be able to offer, because it is something we will do, and we do it for businesses too, by the way, right? And we do. And it's not going to solve all the problems. There are some things that I'm hoping to bring to you. Yes, sorry. I'm gonna, sorry? I'm a resident. Yes. Okay.
So I have a question.
Yes.
And also.
We're just got a microphone there beside you to pick up for the streaming. Yes.
You had talked about the shift 2019, 2020. To me, it's not bizarre. We had a huge social change in the city of Peterborough.
A huge, sorry?
Social change in the city of
Social change, yes.
Yeah. Closing of the warming room, influx of people coming into the community, suffering in addiction as well as mental health issues. It's exacerbated since then.
Yes.
My family are at 222 Wolf Street.
Okay.
And 220 Wolf Street. So we see firsthand every day the effects and fallout that social change and its evolution, its
Yeah.
negative evolution has had
Yeah.
on the city firsthand.
Can
The
everybody
crimes
hear? So
that
we're talking
aren't
about some of the
supported.
social change and family that's living right next to Wolf Street. Yes.
So, I mean, a lot of the crime that I'm witnessing, I have far too many pictures. They're a waste of time. It doesn't do any good.
Yeah.
But the ideal that that is not a predominant issue
Mhm.
in the increase in crime and violence in support of addiction
Mhm.
is a fallacy.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering what is being done to address that
Mhm.
and hold to account those that are, forgive me, I am sorry, in advocacy and sitting in places of power
Mhm.
that are exaggerating
Mhm.
what is creating the crime
Mhm.
and exaggerating, therefore, the violence, the death,
Yeah.
the property damage,
Mhm.
the mental health issues and trauma being experienced because of it
Mhm.
by the residents that are watching the bloody fallout.
Mhm.
I'm wondering what correlation, what dialogue,
Yeah.
and what accountability the police are holding
Mhm.
those entities or those individuals to
Mhm.
for the effect it's having on those committing the crime, the
Right.
ability to do it, the enablement to do it, the lawlessness that's been created to do it,
Mhm.
as well as the trauma
Right.
and the loss and the increase
Okay.
in insurance. Where's that lie? Is
It's-
the onus is when
Yeah.
we're looking at prevention,
Yeah.
is the onus on the residents,
Mhm.
on the citizens of Peterborough to
Mhm.
protect themselves,
Right.
or and get in trouble when we do? And I don't mean any disrespect, but there's a great deal of it going on,
Yeah.
and it's rational thought, absolutely.
Mhm.
I am not homeless. I
Mhm.
am not an addict.
Right.
I am accountable
Mhm.
for my actions in defense of my home and of myself.
Mhm.
But those committing crimes against me, my family, my
Mhm.
neighbors, my
Yep.
place of work are not accountable.
Mhm.
We're losing a lot of your
Yeah,
funding to
we
these
are.
calls. So to what account are advocacy, the majority of voting council, individual advocates, organizations being held
Mhm.
because their initiatives in
Mm-hmm.
support increase the amount of crime, increase the amount of, to support addiction, and
Yeah.
to support living rough.
So if I can just sort of, I'm going to try and distill that down into so the question is, what's the accountability? What are we doing for those who are advocating? And when we have people with mental health, addictions, and the correlation towards crime that might be associated to that? Is that accurately
Well, I
summed
mean,
up?
the correlation, and no disrespect intended, it's absolutely 150% visible 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
It is, absolutely.
I have a picture from yesterday, from Friday, sorry.
Yeah.
After I was
After
surrounded.
which, sorry?
I was surrounded in my vehicle
Okay, yep.
after trying to help my niece.
Mm.
And I have a picture of the Parn van sitting in the middle of the encampment while an ambulance is parked outside.
Mm. Yeah.
So I'm sorry. I have my
certainly
feet
a
planted in the
complex-
real world.
Yeah,
And
no,
I would like to know
don't disagree.
when those entities
Mhm,
are
mhm.
going to be held accountable for us not being able to address our crime and protect our city rather than the community. I mean,
Yep.
it's a legitimate question, and you can tell my face is red and my voice is shaking
Oh, absolutely.
because I'm terrified.
And it's
I'm
frustrating.
constantly terrified
Yeah, I
because
hear
of the
you.
threats that come within the community for even mentioning things like this.
No, I hear you. And I can appreciate where you're coming from, and I'm sorry that that has happened to you.
But it's not
there's
just
nothing-
happening to me. It's happening to
Right, but we're
hundreds of
talking
people
about
all
you
over
right
the city.
now, and that's why I'm saying I'm sorry that that incident happened to you. And it is a complex situation. We aren't going to be the only answer to that solution. I know we aren't. We do have to work with our city, right? We are one portion of the answer, absolutely. We aren't going to arrest our way out of those situations, but we are part of that table helping to come up with solutions. We are part of that. There is a piece, I can tell you, my officers are tired of driving by these things. They are. And you're tired of seeing it. Stay tuned. I know that's not the answer you want right now, but it's something I'm working on.
Are we
Okay.
the only ones accountable? No, honest, I'm not trying to rock the boat.
Well, I don't think that anybody here is necessarily the person you can say it's your fault.
No, I said entity
Yeah.
or organization.
Yep. Right, and that's just it. It's a societal issue. And a lot of people think this is just here. I came from another city. that I would say is significantly more at risk than ours. And that's no compensation, or that doesn't mean anything for you if you're the one suffering. I can tell you we're not in this alone. Everybody is trying to wrestle with this because we're trying to balance how do we treat people humanly and treat them and understand that piece with how do we treat public safety. And it's how do we do both simultaneous, right?
But those people
Yeah.
living under that
Yeah.
initiative in that encampment and will be going into those 50 homes,
Yeah. Yeah.
they're suffering more than I am.
Oh, they are.
For
They are
us,
suffering. Yep.
In our neighborhood, in our area, who speak out in our own protection,
Yep.
we're not just speaking for ourselves.
Yep. I agree.
We're also speaking for those that are unhoused.
Yeah.
We may not like the crime and the violence, we may fear the gunshots and the knives,
Right.
but it doesn't have anything to do
Yeah.
with those that are living.
So I can say, and I'm glad you mentioned the gunshots because I have had the Mayor Semi and the Deputy Mayor Semi. Hey, Chief, listen, we've heard this report of gunshots. Do you know how many reports I have of gunshots? 0.
I've been talking to.
But who have you called? Have somebody called the police and say, 911, somebody just fired a gun off here? Because I don't have any record of that.
No offense, but
Yep.
no one in our neighborhood
Mhm.
calls anyone.
Then I can't do anything about it. And that's where I will say, please call,
Nobody comes.
but please
When I
call,
called on Friday,
right? Yeah,
I was told that it wasn't an emergency.
yeah. But we still would be getting
Call
there.
back to the non-emergency number.
Okay.
So I did.
Yeah.
I panicked.
Mm.
I let it ring twice and I hung up. I called back again. I was told, no, nobody's in danger.
Mhm.
So it's not an emergency. Call back to the non-emergency number.
You can come and see me after, and we can look into that specifically, into that particular incident.
I don't care about that.
But I care. That's the point. I care. Because you're raising an issue, and I can't do anything about it if I don't know. And I will quite often say, if I don't know, we can't go. And we need to know. When I talk about data analytics, man, I got to tell you, if I don't have the information, I can't make sure we have the right people in the right place. I can't advocate for more people if I don't know. And I appreciate that, but I can't do that without the information. So I do need you. And you have a room with counselors who are in this room right now who have heard your concerns. I know they have heard your concerns. And I know they want to hear it. And I know you don't feel it. I can appreciate that. But please, from a policing perspective, I can't help, I can't track, I can't make sure, I can't advocate. Because what happens is people say, well, we don't have a problem. But you're living in a problem.
And so have all of the people in the neighborhood.
But you just told me people aren't calling, and I need you to please, if you have any voice, please tell them, call the police. Please do.
My sister did call when I was gunshot, and they said they had no report, other than from her.
That's okay, at least we got that one, but I don't have them. That's the problem. Right? Anybody else? Any other questions? Because I am conscious of the time here, and I did promise to hold you till 8:30, and it's now 9. Anybody else? No? Thank you very much. I appreciate I'm not going to solve everybody's problems today, but I did want you to see what we're dealing with and what your city has so that you can advocate. Thank you. Thanks. Matt?
Just want to say thank you very much.
Yeah.
Like I really